Chapter 61. In the end, after dinner, I rode Arcanine back home. Gibble on my belt, while leaving Dragonite and Milotic at the stable, so they could be cute with Dratini some more. We skidded to a halt as we finally made it home, and I sighed in delight at the familiar sights. I could see the light in the kitchen through the window, and so I hurried to the door, and then through. I'm home. Vicky! I didn't think you were going to come home tonight. Mama called out as she stuck her head out of the kitchen and smiled as she saw me. I instantly went in for a hug and squeezed tight. I want to sleep in my own bed, I explained bluntly, and Mama smiled down at me. All right, well, you missed dinner. Are you hungry? I already ate, I said as I took the chance to run past her to the living room. Papa was there, already off the couch and walking over, so I slammed into him and giggled as I was spun around. There's my trouble. Staying out late even. What a troublemaker. You love it. I told him back, and he just laughed and hugged me tighter for a second. Welcome home. I just smiled brilliantly, before rushing around and saying hello to everyone. Arcanie even sat up from where he was lazing beside the couch, his puppy bed acting as a pillow for him, but he greeted me with a slobbery lick as I approached for a hug, fending me off. Gross. But I pushed through for a big hug regardless, which was interrupted by Arcanine as she came in and practically flopped on top of me and Arcanie. My muffled voice probably couldn't be made out as I yelled at her for dropping on top of me, as she greeted Arcanie as well. Finally she moved a bit, letting me escape fluff hell, and I glared as she continued to make herself comfortable. You are such a pain. I poked her a bit, but she ignored me, looking pleased at her game. Then I looked up and blinked, because what I was seeing couldn't possibly be real. Lucario, who was holding a load of laundry in her arms, was standing in the doorway. Lucario nodded at me, and walked past, making a questioning noise. Oh. Lucario, you are a dear. That can go over here, I'll fold it up. Mama called out, sounding pleased. Why is Lucario here? I demanded, pointing, looking at Papa, who looked confused. She wanted to give Riolu some space to grow around the others without her there, so she asked if she could come with us. I thought it was a good idea. Papa offered, and I felt my jaw drop, because that was so mean. You shouldn't steal Pokemon, Papa. Bad. Straight to poke jail. I told him, walking over and poking at him. He huffed one of his laughs and dropped a heavy hand onto my head. We didn't steal your Pokemon, Vicky. That's silly, he said as he settled back onto the couch, and a few moments later, Lucario came out looking around, and then noticing Papa, she perked up and walked over, settling onto the couch beside him. Luca? No, you didn't miss anything. I paused the tape. Papa said before hitting the remote controller for the VHS player and starting up the movie they had been watching. Lou. She called out happily as the movie started. Some cop drama movie that Papa really liked. Not stealing my. But. I muttered, glaring at the obvious bond already growing between Papa and Lucario. She was attentive and listening to him as he explained something in the movie, and she even let out a bark of a laugh at the movie's joke. I'm going to bed, I decided aloud, and headed for my room, only pouting a little. What? Come on, Trouble, come watch the movie with us. Papa called back, but I waved him off. Seen it. Besides, I've been running around all day. I want a shower and bed. I called back and made to do just that. It was perfect, except for one of the Growlithe deciding he just had to save me from the shower water. I woke up warm and comfy. Pillow lived up to his namesake. He might have stolen my pillow and refused to let me use it, but he was getting big enough I could use him as a pillow, and we both liked that well enough. Especially as it was getting cold. Growlithe are very warm and snuggly. I was more than happy to sleep in for the day, the first day in my own bed after everything, but as usual there was a brown noser in the house that took his duties far too seriously. No, I told him firmly, as Arcanie was looming over me suddenly, his stinky breath warming my face. Sleeping. Hoof. He huffed at me, and I knew from his tone he wasn't going to take no for an answer. I get to sleep in, no school. I mumbled, but Arcanie only heard me refusing and so reacted. Wuffing at me louder, but I would not be controlled. I reached around until I found my pillow, ignoring that Pillow was sleeping on it, and yanked it to smack Arcanie in the face with it. The looming silence of course meant I win. Pillow grumbled at me, just as blearily, and started pushing at me with his paw to make me let him go, but he was warm. It was cold out today. Then something clamped down on my ankle. And I was suddenly no longer laying down. Wah! Arcanie! Let go! I whined at him, one foot up in the air, as Arcanie was holding me by my ankle. The heavy pajamas thankfully kept his teeth from puncturing, but it wasn't comfortable. He looked at me, eyes narrowed. I know what he wanted. He wanted me to get up, but I would not be intimidated. Never. I told him firmly, and that was my decision. He turned, yanking me off the bed, and started prancing out of my room. Ow. 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 I mumbled as he dragged me right into the hallway and then into the living room. I was skidding around on the wood floors as he dragged me straight into the kitchen, where Mama looked down at me in surprise. This is all Papa's fault, I declared firmly, and with every intent to murder Papa for this. But then not just Mama, but Lucario, who had been sitting at the table, started laughing. Lucario's bark-like amusement surprised me and threw me out of my promises of pain. It's not funny, I mumbled despite knowing it was. I just wanted to sleep though. Finally Arcanie let me go, and I groaned as I stretched out my leg. Which is right when Papa came in. Trouble, you shouldn't lay on the floor in the kitchen, Papa said, his tone chiding, as he walked over to take a seat as well. You're all the worst, I decided, realizing that Arcanie had let me go because he had heard Papa. I scrambled up and pointed at Papa. Arcanie dragged me around with his mouth. What happened to that being bad training? I demanded, and Papa blinked at me, then looked around to everyone, trying to figure out what was going on. Then he noticed Arcanie's look and nodded. Ah, I see. Arcanie. Good job not hurting Vicky, he said, and reached over and patted him on the head. I narrowed my eyes, glaring at Papa, who was doing his best not to laugh at my obvious irritation. I think Arcanie needs some exercise, I decided, the best vengeance I could. Arcanie perked up at the words, and Papa instantly realized the problem. No. Don't you say, Dash. Arcanie? Walkies. I chirped, and instantly there was chaos. Arcanie was a big dog. Like mega super big. It's really hard to compare Arcanie to anything but like a grizzly bear when it comes down to his size. He was not an inside pet. Of course that didn't stop Papa and Arcanie from forcing it, but there had been some restructuring of the house when Arcanie had evolved. Nothing could be left in a hallway, or that could be knocked over by Arcanie's tail, wiping it out. So when I say a 400-pound dog decided that right that moment, the only thing that existed was it, and the outdoors, it only partially describes the chaos of Arcanie jumping to his feet and practically leaping at Papa, demanding walkies. I of course did the smart thing and slipped under the kitchen table, safely ensconced away in the one thing in the kitchen that was Arcanie-proof, well, Arcanie resistant. I finished sweeping up the last of the broken plate and dumped it all into the trash. Mama oversaw my punishment with Meowth on her shoulder, and both of them glared at me without a hint of mercy. Poor Meowth had been laying on the back of the couch that Arcanie had knocked over in his excitement. Right now, no one in the house was happy with me. Lucario was irritated, as she had been knocked out of the chair she had been happily enjoying her breakfast in. I, on the other hand, felt zero shame about the entire situation. Wow. Papa sure needs to work on training Arcanie more if this is the kind of trouble he makes. I chirped out happily, even if no one was accepting of my shittery. If the conference wasn't coming up, you'd be grounded for that, Mama said sternly, and I pouted at that. Sorry, I admitted. Maybe I had escalated a bit more than I should have. I don't really hate when Arcanie drags me around either. It's funny, I guess, I admitted, and Mama snorted. Don't apologize just to me, she demanded, and I sighed. Sorry, Lucario. I ruined your breakfast. I offered the Pokemon that had been standing next to Mama, her arms crossed, glaring. Lou. She nodded, seemingly accepting my apology even if she wasn't happy about it. I see you got everything cleaned up, Papa called out as he entered the kitchen, sweat rolling down his forehead a bit. I could hear Arcanie prancing around in the yard. Trouble cleaned up her mess. Now Vicky, what do you have to say? Sorry Papa. I knew Arcanie would get excited, and that was bad enough, but I shouldn't have used him like that because I was mad. That's not fair to Arcanie. Papa looked at me for a moment and nodded. I'm sorry to trouble. I shouldn't tease you so much. Arcanie knows he isn't supposed to pick you up like that. I'll talk to him about it. I think he does it 'cause he knows I don't mind. He's always careful. I said back, running a hand through my still messy hair. I don't mind that he does it. It's a game we've been doing forever. I just got annoyed today. I guess. Papa said as he pulled me into a hug. Maybe you're finally becoming a teenager. I hear they are moody all the time. I mean, I'll be 11 in a month-ish. Arceus saved me from my daughter as a teenager. Mama said faux fainting as she raised a hand to her forehead. I'll be a great teenager. I argued back, but Mama just looked at Papa and they did the silent communication thing. Well, let me get Lucario some breakfast, I said, pulling away. I still need to head out for morning training with the team, and then evening training with the babies. Alright. Get to it, Vicky, but you better be on your best behavior for a while, Mama said, bending down and kissing me on the forehead. Now get. Yep. Lucario, do you want to come with me to morning training? I can take you to the clan house to see Riolu after. Lou. She agreed immediately, and then to my surprise looked to Papa. Cario? Oh, that's fine. Whenever you want, you can go. Bug me or Vicky anytime. Arcanie can definitely get you there in a flash if trouble isn't around. Papa offered, as he realized what Lucario wanted without issue. She looked pleased and nodded. Dang it. Papa. Stop stealing my Pokémon. It's okay, just breathe, I told Lucario. I was crouched on the ground next to her, as she struggled under gravity. The Pokémon hadn't taken my warning about preparing into account, and had nearly fallen on her face as Chansey had dropped the world onto our shoulders. LL Lou. She stuttered out grindingly. Just breathe. If you need help, just tell us. Chansey can get you out in a hurry. Don't push it. Just let yourself get used to it, I told her. Chansey was hovering close by as well. Of course Arcanine was already running around enjoying the workout. My blue heart was also swimming haltingly in the shallow end, working his body. He wasn't quite as bad as Lucario, but he was also the least used to the gravity out of my main team. Dragonite was already jogging around, as I had her working on her Dragon Pulse, trying to get the skill locked down. Lou. Lucario growled and managed to fully extend her arms, although it left her quivering. Don't push, really. It'll take a bit for your body to adapt to it, I warned, and she did seem to finally heed my warning as her quivering arms grew worse. Eventually, she settled back on the grass and just breathed in and out, sucking in breaths full of air. Yikes. I hadn't expected it to knock Lucario out this much. I looked at Chansey, who smiled back at me. Chansey had gotten a whole lot of practice with this move. Hell, it was undoubtedly her best move. She used it until she couldn't over and over again for months. Chansey's mastery over this one move was pretty insane. It also meant it felt a lot heavier than it was when she had first figured it out. Chansey? Chance? Can you change anything about gravity? Like, make it lighter? I asked, and she hummed, fingering up to her mouth and tapping a few times before sort of tilting around a bit. She wasn't sure. We really didn't do a lot of training with this move, did we? Next break, let's play around with it a bit, okay? Chance. She agreed, looking pleased. Then I tilted my head to Lucario, and Chansey nodded, waving me off. I rose with a bit of strain and walked over to Arcanine. Hey! I'm not seeing you do anything but run around. Fire! I demanded, and she shifted from running in circles around the little lake to burning up and then blasting fire into the lake. Milo! Milotic called out, for once not needing me to prod him into action, as he shuddered, holding in the energy for his attack, gathering it up and then blasting it out. A wave of water rushed out and slammed into the steam cloud Arcanine had made, washing over it and upsetting the lake even more than it had been a moment before. Everyone was doing well. But since my difficult partner was being active, I turned to Dragonite. Her Dragon Pulse was still the orb variety. I noticed she tended towards gathering power and then releasing it all. But I also knew that Dragon Pulse could act more like a beam attack. So what made some Pokemon use one version over the other? Dragonite? Instead of gathering up all the energy, just shoot the Dragon Pulse right away, and keep forcing energy out. I offered, and she blinked, then blinked again. Cutely raising a hand to her chin and tilting her head. She didn't get it. Right now, you're more like Boo-hoo Pew. Right? I offered, showing myself with my hands in front of me, and then shooting the attack after. Instead, try going Pura. I said, instantly raising my hands and shooting out while holding it. She blinked, and then, because I wasn't Ash, she just started laughing at me and pointing. Okay, that didn't make any sense. Right. I said, nodding. Instead of gathering up energy, just shoot it out and keep pushing energy into it, just like how you do Dragon Pulse now. She sort of looked like she wasn't sure it would work. But she nodded. And then she shot her hands out, and instead of a beam or a ball, something completely different happened. A pulse of purple energy burst from her in every way. It was light. Barely even ruffling my hat, but with just that, Dragonite looked at her hands in shock. Well, that was what I was going to suggest we try next. I offered, and she looked at me and nodded firmly. Can you do it again? But this time charge it up? Drag. She agreed, and I stepped back as she got to work. She didn't quite get it up to the level of an attack, but the fact she was able to use Dragon Pulse in a completely different way, that opened up possibilities. I looked at the rest of my team. How many of their moves could be adjusted or changed? I briefly considered if it was worth spending time on something like this before the conference, but I shook that off. Increasing a Pokemon's mastery of their moves could only be a good thing. Arcanine. I called out, and she rushed over, tail wagging and obviously wondering why I had pulled her away from her game of Burn the Lake away while Milotic fought her to keep it topped up. Arc? Got an idea. I want you to use Fire Fang for me. I told her, and she tilted her head before nodding, and instantly her mouth opened, and a set of fiery fangs appeared around her head ready to chomp down with her jaws. So I want you to think about how you form that move, okay? Now, instead of forming the big fangs, try to fill your mouth with fire instead. I explained, pointing at my mouth. Faster on the uptake when it came to battle, Arcanine didn't even hesitate, and as the Fire Fang dissipated, it appeared again, only this time it was a burst of fire inside her mouth. Practically breathing fire, she opened her mouth to show me. Might be a neat trick to use in case you need a smaller bite. I muttered, thinking about if it was a small Pokemon the full-size fangs might not reach, which would be a lot of wasted power. Then again, this version would likely be harder to hit. Arcanine had a big bite, but the fire fangs were larger. Can you do both? I asked, and Arcanine blinked, head tilted, and a moment later her mouth was aflame while much weaker fiery fangs appeared around her jaws. She blinked, showing it off, and I nodded. Okay, that is cool. I told her, and her tail started wagging happily as I looked it over. Work on that for now. And we'll have to check some of your other moves later too. I told her, only making her tail wag harder, as the idea of more training was never a bad thing for her. With that, I checked on Gyarados. He was doing a great job swimming back and forth through the current, which was actually pretty tough. Heavy gravity in water wasn't pleasant to try and get through. How are you doing? I called up to him, and he blinked for a moment as if he was just sort of sleeping before looking down, and instantly his face turned happy. A rumble deep from his throat escaped him as he leaned in, and I reached up at the same time, already knowing what was coming. The sun disappeared. Chapter 62. Riolu. The little pup shouted out in shock at the sight of her mom. I had released everyone, and Lucario basically flopped onto the grass bonelessly as soon as she appeared. We were back at the Ferris compound. Morning heavy training was done. Even I felt some muscles ache from just walking around under the gravity. Lou. Lucario muttered, her voice muffled by the grass, but eventually as Riolu was getting a little frantic, she slowly sat up, her arms shaking just lifting up her body. Lucario, she said, sounding more normal as she assured her daughter. Day 1 of training. Lucario did well. I told Riolu, who looked at me like I was a monster. Eyes wide and shocked. Lucario. Cario. She assured her daughter, then flopped back into the grass. Riolu called out in shock and then looked at me. Relax, your heavy-duty training won't happen for a while. We are focusing on other things first. I assured her, but it didn't seem to do much actual reassurance. Although maybe it was the sinister laughter I offered after. So I just let her worry over her mother for a while. She would relax once Lucario had some time to rest. Instead, I focused on the rest of the forest around me. To my delight, the gumi were out and about. The little slugs were happily munching on leaves, delighting in the ample food and safety. But it reminded me about the whole bacteria thing. Chansey, the gumi bacteria problem. You said to leave it to you, is there something I need to do? I asked after releasing her, and she stretched a bit before tittering at me, and then waving me after her. I followed her to the barn where there was a bucket that Chansey showed to me. I didn't get it. She tittered again, and then handed me a bottle of soap? I looked it over, and noticed it was the sort of stuff that Nurse Joy used in the Pokemon centers. A medical cleaner? I looked over the back and blinked. Pokemon safe? Chance. She assured me, nodding, and mimed pouring some into the bucket and then filling it with water, and then making a dunking motion. You just dunk the gummy in, and they are good? Chance. She nodded, puffing up looking proud. That's amazing, Chansey. We should get it done soon then. Chance. She denied, waving me off. Then waving her fin in a circle. When I didn't get that. She tapped on her wrist and looked at it like a watch. Before? You already did it. She nodded happily, and I was shocked. When had that happened? When? I've been here every day. She mimed sleeping and then pointed at me, and then pointed far away. When I went home. You did it that night? I asked, and she nodded. So I slammed into her with a big hug. She stiffened in surprise at my sudden attack, but she softened and patted my back. Thank you, Chansey. I whispered, I hadn't known she had done this. She never even told me. Chansey. She murmured soothingly, and I pulled back. You should. I would have helped. Chansey. She waved it off and patted my head. You're too nice to me. I told her simply, and then just hugged her again. Not like hugging Chansey was a bad thing. Eventually, we headed back outside and I had to refocus. I headed over to the first gummy I saw, one happily munching at the bottom leaves of a bush, who looked up at me with his cute little eyes as I approached. Hi. Are you happy? Got enough food? I asked, and it woogled for a minute before straightening up. Gumi. It cheered, and I smiled back. They were happy. I stood up and got ready to get back to it. I was just happy they were happy. Looking around, I noted a lot of them wandering around, and even noticed it was harder to find them as there were less slime trails. I hadn't even noticed, but Chansey's bath for them must have done more than just make them safer to be around. All right. Let's get training. I called out and gathered up my little team. Jangmo happily followed after Dragonite, practically prancing as he chased her. Dratini was already wrapped around her ankle and cheering happily at every step. They would be on Dragon Pulse training. Perfect training for the baby Pokemon. Riolu quickly got back to work as well. Under her mother's eyes, she worked twice as hard, focusing her vacuum wave tighter and tighter. I nodded at her improvement just from a day of focused training. Enhanced diet would also help. I noticed Mimikyu wasn't around and headed inside. In the room that had been given to me before I heard him before I entered. The closet light was on, and he seemed to be talking to himself, as I could hear him. Cuckoo. Kukuk. His voice came out and I cleared my throat. Mimikyu? Kukuk. He cheered and the closet door opened with the head of his disguise peeking out. It's training time. Do you want to keep working on your project, or come practice? I asked, and he cheered happily as he disappeared for a second. I heard some ruffling around and then he came out walking over to me. Happily, I bent down to give him a ride and walked back out to the growing section of the stable that was our move practice area. The fact a pond was growing larger every day was something I was ignoring. Alright, buddy. We are still working on Shadow Ball. You've made massive improvements though. Don't get disheartened, okay? Cuckoo. He cheered, seemingly unbothered by his inability to finish the move yet. While that happened, I moved back and grabbed a certain pokeball. Time to do more work with Jibble. Releasing her, she thankfully didn't attack, looking around and seemingly comfortable with the yard now. Hey Jibble. How are you today? I asked as I kneeled down. She had focused on me as I spoke, but as I got down to her level she lost interest and started looking around. Gib, she said, and started walking away on her tiny little legs. Waddling along. Arceus, my little shark dragon, was the cutest. Interested to see what was on her mind, I got up and followed after her, but it didn't take long to figure out what had caught her attention. The sound of roaring and blasts of energy. Dragonite training the two dragon kids. She was explaining Dragon Pulse and shooting it off. The energy ball smashed into the water and exploded. And this whole situation definitely caught Jibble's attention. She waddled over, mouth open, and muttering her name every once in a while. Jibble. She muttered as she started at the blast of draconic energy. Eventually, she stopped approaching and just watched, as the little ones tried to get the move. Do you want to learn too? I asked, and she didn't really react. Just watching with an absent look in her eyes. It was hard to tell if she was incredibly interested, or already half asleep. So I settled in, giving her time to figure it out. Dragonite got both of the boys started. Jangmo-o let out a chime-like roar over and over as he tried to get it to work. Dratini though was quiet, more focused. I could see that unlike Jangmo-o he was forming his energy. Neither were getting it yet, but both on their path. Dragonite nodded and stepped back, letting the two boys hammer their head into the act of learning a new move for a while. But that gave me a chance. I waved, and Dragonite walked over greeting me with a wave of her own before she looked down at Jibble. Jibble looked more through Dragonite than anything. Drag? She got interested in you teaching the boys. I explained, and she nodded, settling onto the grass with a sigh beside me. We settled into a moment of quiet. Dragonite was pretty tired from the morning training, but I could tell she was very interested in Dratini's training. He's picking it up quick, I offered, and she burst into a smile and nodded back. Drag. Dragon Dra. She replied back happily, and threw out a few punches, while looking proud. It took me a second and she pointed at Dratini, and then at her. Ah. Yeah, he's definitely a fighter like his mama. I agreed, she preened at my understanding. I glanced over at Jibble. Still quiet, and focused. Dragonite? Do you have any advice for this one? I asked, nodding towards Jibble. Dragonite looked to me, and then to Jibble, and sort of scrunched up a bit in thought. Drag. She offered, and patted me on the head and then called out. Dragonite. Drag. And suddenly Dratini hurried away from the water's edge and approached looking serious. He looked from Dragonite to Jibble, and Dragonite nodded. Dratini arched up. Ready for a fight. Is that wise? I asked, and once more Dragonite patted me on the head. Drag. She spoke and reached out and pushed Jibble forward. Jibble didn't react super well, snapping at air and sort of looking around. Then towards Dratini. Teeny. He challenged her, and Jibble stared, before just rushing forward, mouth open. I felt myself lean forward worried, but Dratini was older, and probably wiser. A twister arced out, and instead of biting him, Jibble bit into the dragon-tinged air and launched away. Gib 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 gib. She uttered as she rolled. And I think it was the first time I heard her give out a noise of pain. I rose up, but Dragonite trilled, reassuring. And Jibble rose up. Her body shimmered. She opened her mouth, and out came a roaring rage of energy. It wasn't quite Dragon Pulse. Dratini dodged, and it surprisingly did some damage to the ground as it tore through. Then it was over, and Jibble stood there, steam coming from her mouth as she stared. I waited to see what would happen next, but time slowly continued, and slowly I realized Jibble wasn't going to attack again. I walked over cautiously. "Jibble?" I asked, but she didn't respond, and as I reached over to touch her, ready for her to snap, instead she just sort of teetered and then fell over. "Jibble!" I gasped, reaching out, but it was a moment later I heard it. Snoring. Jibble was asleep. Did you tire yourself out so you went to sleep with your eyes open? I asked aloud, because what else was I supposed to do with this? This little ball-shaped dragon was the weirdest dragon ever. I ended up just laughing, not sure what else to do, and picked her up. With a bit of work, I helped her close her eyelids, and she murmured in her sleep and seemed to rest easier. "Dragon. Dragonite." Dragonite called out and then started tittering to herself as well. Dratini though slumped, looking rather bummed out that his battle had ended so fast. "Good job, Dratini, thank you," I told him as I walked by, stopping to reach out and pet his head. "Why don't you get back to training? I want to see your dragon pulse." "Dra. Teeny." He chirped and slithered away. Jang Mo, I noticed, had seemed to make a bit of progress while Dratini was distracted, and the little noodle got worked up to try and catch up. They had a little rivalry. I walked Jibble back to the house, deciding to get some food started. I had a feeling she was going to be hungry when she woke up. By the time the food was cooking, the smell had hit Jibble and had woken her right back up. Splitting off a snack for her as I finished the meal for everyone. I kept half an eye on her. That attack. It hadn't been Dragon Pulse, and it hadn't been Dragon Breath, it had been odd. The only thing I could think of was Dragon Rage. It made sense. Jibble wasn't strong. She was way too young for an attack like that. But Dragon Rage made sense. "Did you have fun in the battle?" I asked her, and she blinked at me, looking towards my hands for food, only to see a ladle instead. "Gib?" I just rolled my eyes. "All right." I agreed, and cut up a few more berry bits for her to chomp down. I dropped the bits onto the porch I was sitting on. In a way, she couldn't just bite it, so she had to grab it. She was still practically biting herself when she did, but it didn't seem to hurt her too bad. Eventually, food was done. I called everyone for food, and started portioning it out. Jibble thankfully didn't interfere, just sitting there drooling for more. Feeding her, I did what I had started doing every time I fed her. Stroking her head and horns. Making sure she understood that I was there, and wasn't stealing her food. The last thing I wanted was for Jibble to grow up with a food aggression. It would take work, but I wanted Jibble to be happy. I was washing the dishes in the stream when I noticed it. A gummy that was approaching. Slowly woogling over until it was by my elbow. "Hello there, Goom." It called out, and I instantly knew who this was. "Oh, that you, Brave?" I asked, and she undulated up and down as her agreement. "Nice to see you," I greeted her. The gummy had been pretty focused for the few days since they got their cave. They had explored all over, and with the understanding the fence around the area was the perimeter of their safe space, had explored it all. Grandpa Roy had done as I asked and had a few landscapers come in and set up some more bushes, especially around the river, and the gummy had happily settled in with their food and habitat settled. "Goom. Goomy," she called, and then looked over towards where the distant sound of Jang Mo's chime-like roar echoed out. I looked at her, and felt myself want to jump at the chance. This was it. She was finally reaching out. Taking a deep breath, I calmed myself down and set the dishes to the side. "I don't mind at all, if you want to join us for training," I offered happily. "If you get stronger, you can protect your family better." "Goom." She nodded, looking pleased at my easy acceptance. "You know, the offer is still there," I said, turning to look at her fully. "If you want to join my team, I'll go all out teaching you, and helping you grow stronger. All the way to Gudra," I added, and Gummy's little eyes widened at the name of their final evolution. But she hesitated, looking away towards the ground, and then towards the little cave. I looked over as well. To the line of Gummy going in and out. All of them chattered to each other. They were happy. "You want to protect them?" I said, and Brave nodded, looking up at me. Gumi. I know we only met a little bit ago. But I want to protect them too. I explained simply as I smiled at their happy little wandering. Right now, they have lots of protection, but it's true they could have more. I'll help you regardless, but if you're on my team, you'll travel. You'll fight battles that you can't imagine, and you'll grow from it. The quiet after that stretched. Brave woogled in place for a while, staring at her family. At the people she was the protector of. I reached out and picked her up, much to her surprise. Let's protect them. Together. I offered, bending down and going forehead to forehead. Our eyes met. Please, I want to be your friend. I offered quietly, eyes closed and just trying to convey how much it meant to me. How much I wanted this little goo to accept me. Gumi. She said quietly, and then I opened my eyes, because the feeling was so strange. She was rubbing her forehead against mine. She had accepted. Yes. I hooped, rising up and spinning around, earning a little squeal, and then I settled back down, flopping into the grass as I settled her on my lap. We'll need to change out your pokeball for a premier ball, I told her, with a wobbly smile as I felt tears coming to my eyes. I was so happy. Gumi smiled, and I melted. A note from Sarah's. Thank you all for reading. Chapter 63. A note from Sarah's. Sorry for the extended wait. The next day I swapped things around. Morning training was with the little ones at the stable. All right. Dragon Pulse. I called out, and Dratini nodded. He shimmered for a moment, and then roared. A purple energy leapt from his mouth, arcing out and shifting around, a dragon-like figure seemingly leading the energy, and then it smashed into the water. The beam kept up for a few seconds, before Dratini couldn't keep it up anymore. Huffing tiredly, he looked up to me, and I gave him my most gigawatt smile. Amazing job. I cheered, jumping into the air, and then rushing over to lift him up and jump around with him. Earning happy giggles from the little dragon. I had taken on some direct work with Dratini, because as I spun him around I saw why Dragonite was a little distracted. She was helping not just Brave, but an entire horde of Gumi learn Dragon Pulse. Brave now had a white Pokeball. She had agreed and was on my team, and needed to catch up to Jangmo and Dratini, who were both at the point of managing Dragon Pulse. Being taught it really made it easier to pick up. But as Brave had been invited to learn Dragon Pulse along with the other dragon kids, she had hurried off and come back with an entire dollop. They had all wanted to learn. Even if they weren't on my team, the Gumi still wanted to get strong. In response to their desires, Dragonite had put her hands on her hips and nodded, then got down to teaching. It would be a while before the Gumi got it, but I really looked forward to seeing the Gumi all shooting Dragon Pulses together. I bet it would look amazing. Teeny. I turned back to my little noodle and rubbing my nose against his own. Yeah, buddy, you did it. Want to go show your papa? I asked, and Dratini perked up and nodded rapidly. I laughed as I ran off, Dratini laying over my shoulder to Milotic, who was lazing around but still doing important work. Milotic was working with Gible today. I had realized as important as it was for me to help socialize her, I also needed some help. Dragonite was a great main choice. The large dragon had wrecked Garchomp, and even Gible was aware of her in a way she wasn't other Pokemon or people. Milotic, though, wasn't weak either. And he could throw down dragon power like the best of them. Right now, I had Gible and Milotic spending time, as Milotic was supposed to be talking to, and trying to get her interested in things. As I ran up, I could see the plan was rather doomed to failure, but at least Gible wasn't trying to bite him anymore. No, instead, she was on her back, snoring, curled up in Milotic coils as Milotic shirked his duty and napped too. Teeny. Dratini called out as he caught sight of it, and slithered off my shoulder, rushing forward. The little guy instantly slipped up into Milotic's coils and made noises for attention. Oh? Was Dratini actually being jealous? Did seeing Gible sleep with his papa strike him as wrong and make him want to kick her out for taking what is his? Nope. He instantly rubbed against his papa and then cutely yawned and curled up too. I slowed to a stop as I realized all three of the Pokemon were now napping. Staring for a moment, I felt myself just chuckling at the situation. I guess for once Milotic would get a pass. If everyone over here wanted an early nap, If you can't beat them, join them, right? Slipping up onto Milotic, who opened a big eye before stilling as he realized it was me. I just ignored his sweating as he realized he had been caught, and instead slipped over to Jibble, gently slipping in beside her. I made sure to reach out my hand wrapped around her horn in case she woke up and chose violence. I could hold her back and then curled up into the cuddle pile for my own nap. Milotic breathed out in relief and then laid his head back down, nuzzling me and Dratini. The wind was cold, but the morning sun and dragon scales were warm. I soon found myself dozing off. It would have been great if we weren't interrupted. Victoria. Sleep, I mumbled back, opening my eyes a little to see, not just Grandpa Roy. Oh, right. Upon opening my eyes, I saw the reason I was having morning training with the kids today. Besides Grandpa Roy stood two men I had met before. Lance. Cigarette Guy. I greeted them as I started to gently dead-angle myself from sleeping Pokemon. Milotic finally opened his eyes as well, and he glared as he rose up to his full height, looming over us. His coils shifted, and I had to grab Jibble as I was pushed to my feet. Dratini wrapped around his papa's neck, glanced around to see what had caused the end of his nap. Milotic pushed into Lance's space, glaring down at him. And then huffing just once, the air escaping from his neck with a faint whistle of warning. Grandpa Roy started, but Lance cut him off. I don't think he likes me very much. Dragonite is his wife. I explained simply as adjusted Jibble into a baby carry. She was still snoring away, completely unconcerned with anything going on. I see? Lance offered, seeming more confused than anything as Milotic breathed out heavily into Lance's face, before floating off. Today was the day Lance and Brushfire were going to visit. Lance wanted to see the new dragons, and ask me questions about Kitakami. Something apparently the League had told Uncle Leo that they wanted us to allow this. And so here we were. Lance looked away from Milotic, having noticed Dratini around his neck, to look at me. Our eyes met. We should have a battle. I told him, and he blinked at my sudden words. Yet instead of turning me down, his chin tilted up and he smirked. I would like that, but it wouldn't be fair to battle you now. Win the conference, and prove yourself against the Elite Four. I will give you a battle you will never forget then. He offered back a look shared between us that I had to respect. He wasn't just bullshitting, actually telling me to reach the peak. I'll see you there then. I said, dead serious. Then I looked back to the area around us. Right. You're here to learn about the new dragons, and you're here for an inspection. No smoking. I demanded, and Brushfire's shoulders slumped, but he nodded to me. Indeed, I am very curious about the new species. Your Jibble? She's small. Lance spoke, looking down at Jibble in my arms. Jibble was the runt of her family. I'm pretty sure she's only a few weeks or so old, and she's a bit of a weird one. I answered Lance's question. I'm still working with her to not just bite and stuff everything into her mouth. So don't touch her. I ordered, and despite my warning, it did look like Lance had to hold himself back from doing the opposite. I couldn't blame him for that. Resisting petting a Pokemon was hard for me too. It's rare to have that issue with Dratini. They are often gentle, almost skittish as children. He offered, and I nodded. I can see it. Come on, I'll show you where the kids are. I jerked my head towards where the sound of explosions could still be heard. I walked ahead, gently rocking Jibble, actually pretty happy at how comfortable she was acting with all the motion and noise. She was pretty cute like this, mouth wide open and breathing in and out cutely. We turned through a copse of trees, and there it was. The pond we were making through repeated attacks. Dragonite was greeting Milotic and Dratini, and the others were all there. Jangmo-o still working on his attacks, alongside the Gummy Horde. Ho? Lance muttered as we approached, his words completely taken over by his stare at Dragonite. What? I demanded a little petulantly, daring him to call her weak again. Your Dragonite's muscle definition is extraordinary. He stated simply, his voice showing nothing but respect. I'm interested in your training methods for her. He said, in a way that sounded like the words escaped him before he could think of them. Before I could respond, intending to scoff at him, Dragonite had noticed us. She stomped over, and this time she made sure she was right in his face and standing at her full height, arms crossed. The sound of her stomping had jerked Jibble awake, or maybe something else. Sensing a rampaging dragon? I soothed her in my arms, but I had to admit I was impressed with Lance's response. "You're beautiful," Lance offered, and the words caught Dragonite off guard. Her defensive attitude shifted as she was so confused as she looked at me. "I don't know," I replied back with a shrug, not sure what Lance was up to. "When I saw you last as a Dragonair, you were healthy, but not a battler." "Now?" he asked, and Dragonite huffed a bit at that. "You've grown magnificently. Although I can still see the hallmarks that you aren't of our line," he explained. I wasn't really sure if I could imagine how Dragonite used to be as a Dragonair. She was how she was for me. "We train a lot to beat you," I explained, and that got Dragonite back on task, puffing up with her arms recrossed, looking down at Lance. "You think you are ready for that?" he asked, and Dragonite huffed, nodding and glaring. "Come on out, partner," Lance offered, and instantly the atmosphere changed. A Dragonite appeared. Big. Like really, really big. I'd seen this Dragonite before, of course. This was Lance's ace. I'd literally watched him battle before, but it was one thing to see something on TV and another to have it right next to you and be able to compare. Lance's Dragonite was a full head larger than my girl. Wider too. But he wasn't dumpy. No, he just was bigger. Fuller. At the appearance of such a powerful dragon, there was a reaction among my friends. Jibble froze, eyes locked ahead in my arms. Her whole body tense. Dragonite flinched back. The Gumi all flinched away. Jangmo squared up, but he was definitely looking worried. "You've noticed it?" Lance spoke, bringing my focus back to him. "Blackthorn breeds Dragonite to make them stronger, and has done so for centuries. Our Dragonite are larger than wild-caught. Their scales are stronger to enhance their defensive powers," he explained, running hand across his partner's side. His Dragonite didn't notice, because there was a Dragonite versus Dragonite stare down. "But my Dragonite's stronger," I responded back, startling the man who had been staring up at his partner, extolling his virtues. And I couldn't allow that. Dragonite's muscle definition isn't just for looks. It's pure power. Functional. I argued, standing beside her and staring at both Lance and his Dragonite. "But that's not all. I don't mind sharing this, since you'll see as I punch through the Elite Four. Dragonite is fast. That muscle isn't just power, but speed as well." "Ho? You think that'll be enough?" My partner is the distillation of all the Blackthorn work with Dragonite over the centuries. Breeding, training, everything. "And I'll crush that thinking," I argued back. "All of that is fine, but it doesn't make a strong Pokemon. Bonds do. Friendship. I'll show you how much we can grow and crush all that old thinking," I decided, and Lance broke not into a smirk, but a smile. "Defeat me then, Victoria Ferris. If you can." "Prue?" Lance's Dragonite asked. Lance turned and reached up to pat his cheek. "It'll be a fun challenge, won't it, partner?" "Prue." "Teeny," Dratini called out, crawling up his mama's leg and then around her back until he was resting on her shoulders. He glared up at the big Dragonite. "Drat. Dratini. Teeny. Drag." The big guy responded back, but he wasn't angry. The big Dragonite just seemed amused. "Your Dratini has a lot of pride in his mother," Lance offered, and I nodded. "Of course. Dratini knows his mama is the strongest Dragonite there is," I said, and Dratini looked at me and nodded, whistling cutely in agreement. "We'll see," Lance offered, but he shook himself lightly. As much as I would enjoy speaking about Dragonite all day, I am here to ask you some questions about the new dragon types found in Kitakami," he said, and I nodded. Dragonite, realizing this wasn't going to become a battle, seemed to relax a bit, but was still shooting looks of aggression at the big guy. "All right. Jangmo. Come here, buddy," I called my armored boy, and he rushed over. He hadn't been practicing his dragon pulse anyways, distracted as he was by the new stuff happening. He galloped over and then stopped staring down Lance. Then he did a shimmy. And then another and leapt backwards in a full 360. Lance stood there. I stood there without saying or doing anything. Slowly, I realized Lance wasn't going to understand. He didn't have the context to know what Jmoa was showing him. Lance knelt down, which was the wrong thing to do. "Greetings, little dragon." Lance spoke, but it wasn't right. My little guy kept glaring before he slumped and sighed, at the idiot human, before running over to me, and spinning in between my feet. "Hey buddy," I told him as I knelt down to pet him with one hand even as I held Jibble in the other. Jmoa liked scratches under his scales. They were constantly growing and shifting after all, and they got itchy. "I don't understand," Lance explained, and I nodded. "I can't tell you." "Not directly. But when you go to Kitakami, and you find his family, I suggest you watch before approaching. Maybe if you watch long enough, you'll understand why you lost Jmoa's interest just now," I explained, simply shrugging my shoulders. Jmoa wasn't even looking at the man anymore, walking away as if he was completely uninteresting. Lance nodded slowly, looking confused, and also desperate to pet Jmoa. He was a dragon lover. I sighed. "If you want a clue? Don't treat them like Dratini. Dratini and Dragonite have a completely different culture to Kamui. Listen and watch, and understand how they interact with each other. That's how you must interact with them." This time Lance nodded more firmly. "Thank you. It's nothing. If you can't figure it out, then you aren't worthy to make friends with them." Then, because Lance was kind of pathetic looking, not being able to pet any of the dragons so far, I walked over to the gummy horde that had all pressed together at the appearance of Dragonite. "Brave, can you come here?" I asked, and then the gummy that was in front of the pack broke off and slimed over. Brave looked up at me and spoke. "Gumi? I'd really appreciate a few minutes," I explained, and she sort of undulated a bit before jumping up into my hand that I had left open for her. Once again I was struck that while Brave was still sort of slimy feeling, she wasn't actually coated in it anymore. The soap that Chansey had used had really left them with so much less mucus over their bodies. Walking over, Lance was looking at me in confusion as I sighed and waved at him. "Go ahead and hold out your hand," I demanded, and Lance looked me over, obviously confused. He looked at Goonie. She had spun around to look at him, and she wiggled a bit. To my surprise, Lance's look of confusion vanished as his eyebrows nearly slammed together. Which is saying something, because Lance had really sharp eyebrows. Without a word, he held out his hand, and Brave looked from me to him before slowly crawling across the gap to land in his palm. Lance stared down at Brave for a long while as she stared up at him, and then slowly, Lance reached out his other hand and stroked her cheek a little, earning a gurgling purr. "This is a dragon type." "Yep," I responded, popping the P sound as loud as I could. "Gumi is a pure dragon type." Lance looked up at me, finally tearing his eyes from Gumi. "Pure?" "Yep," I responded with equally as much force. Then, because Gumi was getting bored, I waved at him. "Do this," I said, showing my hand squeezing a bit. It took a moment, but Lance squeezed down on Gumi, earning giggles of delight as she was released. Lance's expression was one of understanding. He did it again. Brave giggled happily. Nirvana was reached. Not that this isn't fascinating, but we still need to finish our inspection, Mr. Brushfire called out after not nearly long enough, as Lance and I both whirled to glare at the man. We had only finished squeezing like half of the gummy. What about all the others? We couldn't just not give them attention too. "Mr. Brushfire, I will ask for a further moment of your time," Lance said rather strongly, and then went back to squishing the gummy. I nodded and squished the gummy as well. Squish, squish, squish. Goo, goo goo gummy. They giggled. Ah. This was the life. But Lance finally broke the silence between us. "You captured a lot of them." "The natives of Kitakami saw them as a pest, they were being hunted. So I had to rescue them." "I see." He muttered a little darkly, before sighing and then switching to a new gummy that was practically bouncing to be next. I will have to capture some myself. I don't suppose you would share their location? I honestly don't know. I answered back, tossing the gummy in my hands up into the air a few times, much to its delight. When I was there, this group was the only nest I found. I brought all of them with me. I see. But check caves and damp spaces. I found them on the east side of the mountain, but there are other streams and things that some of them might live by. They eat leaves, and like damp places. I will take your words to heart. He replied sincerely, and then he sighed, gently placing the gummy onto the ground and patting its head. As much as I wished to continue, I looked at him and nodded. All right. Sorry everyone. We'll play again later, okay? I asked, and the gummy that hadn't gotten a chance slumped, but eventually started slurping away towards the nearest bush or the stream. Victoria. I requested to come today to ask you about Kitakami, but that wasn't my only purpose. Champion, you should be careful of your next words. Grandpa Roy cut in. He had been sitting on the table on the porch watching over us, but hearing what Lance had said, he had instantly cut in, rising up as well. Lance looked to him and nodded. Rest assured, I mean no harm. Victoria. If you were a child of Giotto, I would have already offered you an apprenticeship with the Blackthorn. A few years as an apprentice and it doesn't matter in the end. He replied with a sigh. You are a daughter of Kanto. Yep. I answered back cheekily. That was pretty sweet of him to say honestly. Dang it. I kinda liked Lance. He had this arrogance about him, but he had quickly started playing with the gummy. Anyone who was friends with gummy was a friend to me. And so, there will be trouble. Lance continued sighing as he looked over my Pokemon, all chilling around the land. There were Giotto men unhappy about your Milotic trade from the beginning, but the decision was to let it continue as Giotto has a trade agreement with Kanto. We benefited as well. But this? Not just the usual warmongers are angry about the situation. He spoke simply and straightforward towards me, like an adult speaking to a child. Champion. I don't believe I like where this conversation is going. Grandpa Roy spoke again, and Lance looked to him and bowed his head. I apologize, Mr. Ferris. I simply wish to convey the situation to her. Victoria's actions should be celebrated, but the world is not always so kind. He continued to stare down Grandpa Roy, who eventually nodded. I would like to hear how much danger my granddaughter is in with Giotto. Less than she would have been just a few years ago. I am champion now. He stated arrogantly, but it wasn't meant to be that way. To Lance, it was just fact. What a Chad. You will protect her? Grandpa Roy asked, and Lance bowed his head. As much as I am able. Not even I can stop the tide of politics entirely. So, people in Giotto are upset I have dragons? I asked, as the conversation went silent for a moment, and Lance refocused on me. Not just dragons, Victoria. New dragons. New Pokemon entirely. I will be leaving on a trip to Kitakami soon. My hope is that capturing the Pokemon for Giotto will help calm the tensions again. Know that many in my clan do not mind your actions, and now that we have met again, I will speak in your favor. But there will always be dissenting voices. Yeah, I get that. I said, kicking my feet a bit. How much of this was something I really had to do anything about? Should I do anything about it? What was the right choice here? A large part of me didn't care about the politics involved. It was dumb. What Pokemon I captured wasn't anyone's business but mine, and certainly not a group of people on another side of the MT Silver that had even less to do with me. But the thing about politics is that it didn't care if you wanted to take part. How bad of a threat is it? Should I be worried about someone attacking me? No, Lance said instantly, but then he hesitated. That was explanation enough. So, the people that are angry with me. Any of them strong? No, he responded again instantly, the arrogance of a dragon on full display. But they are not wise. I muttered, thinking about the situation. That you are telling me this at all, tells me that it's more of a threat than you want to admit to me. I decided on saying. And Lance's face blanked for a moment, then he bowed. That is indeed the truth. You have good eyes. So what exactly do they want from me? I demanded, and Lance hesitated. Nothing solid enough for me to share. If you felt that I needed to be warned, then I should hear the rest. You are protecting me by keeping me ignorant. I spoke back softly. Glaring at the grass. I was starting to get angry. Lance shifted, looking to Grandpa Roy, who was still stone-faced. Brushfire was practically clawing at the air for a cigarette, I noticed. This hadn't gone the way the man had expected, I assumed. Finally, Lance turned back to me. There is talk about Johto using political pressure to try and force the issue. Removal of the Pokemon to Johto. But that will not happen. Once I return from Kitakami, I will balance the scales, and the issue will end. Vicky. There is nothing to worry over. Grandpa Roy cut in then. Kanto will not roll over at this demand. And neither will the clan allow it. Thanks, Grandpa Roy. I said back with a smile, but honestly. I'm not that worried about that though. No one is taking my friends away. I explained simply. Instead, I decided enough was enough. I rose up and stretched. I think I'm just going to have to remind everyone who they are dealing with. I decided and smiled as the decision was made. And who are we dealing with? Lance asked, and I turned to him and smirked. You'll find out. Champion Lance. Master of Flying-type Pokemon. I called out, pointing at him. Don't think I don't know. I know your secret. Lance looked startled at my sudden yelling before his face flattened. That joke again? He grumbled, and I cackled at his tired irritation. So I'm not the only one that knows your dastardly secret. I am not a flying-type specialist. He argued, but I just laughed, ignoring his argument. Very well, Victoria. I hope you take my warning seriously, but don't let it alter your path. Your journey is not yet complete. I opened my mouth to blow off what he said, but instead I gave him a bow. Thank you for the warning, champion. I will take it to heart, but it won't alter my path. Good. You certainly have the attitude of a dragon master. Lance rose up and rejoined Brushfire, and after a short walk around the property, they both left. Lance climbing atop his Dragonite and whooshing away. Vicky? I don't exactly approve, but the warning from the champion was serious. Oh, I know. I think I need to reach out to someone, and then get back to training. I need to be so strong during the conference that no one ever thinks they can take my friends from me again. I stomped off. I guess it was time to stop playing around. Chapter 64. After getting back from a very important conversation, I headed out in the afternoon sun to do some more training. I was fired up, and my Pokemon reacted to it. Dragonite had rushed us back to our training area, and we had gone at it. Full power. I called out, and Gyarados roared as he hit the waterfall. He couldn't swim up it. Chansey had the whole area blanketed with gravity. It was too much, but that hadn't stopped us before. He started swimming against the current, trying to rise, and failing, but it didn't matter. Failure was growth. Failure was strength. I turned to check over the rest of my team and nodded. Chansey was being absolutely brutal. I had explained what the plan was, and she had nodded along without a second thought. We had spent 20 minutes going over the training plan we had been using before, and figuring out how much further we could push it. It was why Dragonite wasn't just working out or training like normal. She was pushing a boulder around, back and forth under heavy gravity. Dragonite's scales shimmered with her sweat as she worked hard. But Chansey was there, healing and working her up. Chansey was also working out alongside Dragonite, literally doing push-ups or running circles around the boulder, calling out support to the dragon. Arcanine and Milotic had also pitted themselves against each other. Milotic was fired up. More so than usual. I had spent some time explaining to my team what had happened, and what it meant for us. The fact that there were people in Johto pushing to take some of my friends away from me? That it meant we had to prove to everyone that trying to do something so stupid was foolish had fired my big fish up. So much so that he was actually pushing Arcanine back. Milotic was slinging Water Pulse, and Surf around pushing Arcanine's fire right back as she ran around in circles, nearly constantly moving while blasting him with flame. The whole area was a steam-filled hell as Arcanine held nothing back, but she was actually being pushed back from her type disadvantage. Not something that usually happened, as Arcanine usually bullied Milotic. Of course she wasn't unhappy about this. It only seemed to fire her up even more. Lucario, the final member of the heavy gravity training, was more mobile than before. She was stomping around, moving against the air itself and struggling, but she was getting stronger. I nodded, checking the sky to see the sun dwindling. Arcanine's fire gave us light, but it was getting close to break time. My team was growing. That's it. I called out the next morning. Mimikyu cried out as he threw the swirling orb of energy, and it flew a distance before smashing into the water, exploding outward. Cuckoo! He cried out, and I ran over and swept him up into a hug. That looked like Shadow Ball to me. I cried out, and he cried back. We spun around in circles, much to Mimikyu's delight, as I laughed happily at his success. My Pokémon were growing so strong. I stopped spinning, feeling a little dizzy as I looked to the rest of my little guys. Brave had picked up Dragon Pulse much faster than either of the boys. She had been a natural with it. Her natural Dragon Pulse was the orb type. Gathering energy in front of her and then shooting it off with a cute little cry. Her learning it so fast had lit a fire in Dratini and Jangmo, both boys quick to work even harder to strengthen their attacks. They were doing great, learning to pressurize the attack. I would need to set them up for some actual battle training soon. Glancing over, I looked at Riolu, who was working well under Lucario's eyes. Lucario's tiredness had continued to shock the crap out of the little brat, and she had started giving Chansey actual fearful looks whenever the goddess walked past her. Heh. I made sure to smile widely at the brat whenever she noticed me, while telling her she would get the same training soon. She looked almost as eager at the idea as she was fearful. Heh, fighting types. Take a break, okay? I told Mimikyu, who chittered happily as I let him go, and he hurried back to the house. He had refused to let me see inside the closet, but I was looking forward to his project. Then I looked at my most difficult Pokémon. Gible was currently watching the dragons work with blank eyes. Time to do more training. Gible. Jump up. I called, and she didn't move, instead sort of turning to look at me. Gib. I slumped. Getting Gible to take orders had been ineffective so far. But we were still trying. Come on, Gible. I know you can do it. Jump up. I called, jumping up myself to show her. Slowly she blinked. She stood up, and then just toddled over to me. Gib. She called out, and to my surprise didn't bite, instead reaching up for my hand and grabbing it. I stared down at her, she stared up at me. And then she looked back towards the dragon's training. Well, this is okay too, I admitted, as I sat down with her hand in mine. Dragon Pulse. I called out, and Jangmo glowed as he launched the attack. Mimikyu, who had come out of the house after lunch to get more training, was the dragon's sparring partner. I smirked as Mimikyu tried to dodge, and this time the attack hit, but instead of damaging him it just sort of splashed off Mimikyu. Jangmo cheered at the hit, and Mimikyu sagged a bit before perking back up. Alright. Mimikyu. Next time, hit the Dragon Pulse with a Shadow Ball. I called, and Jangmo didn't hesitate in charging up another Dragon Pulse. Jangmo's Dragon Pulse came out as a roaring dragon. He was more of a beam user, and it tracked. Sorta, towards Mimikyu. Mimikyu, who was quick to charge up a Shadow Ball and throw it at the attack. The two energies collided and I nodded. While Jangmo was able to slow the Shadow Ball, it was obvious that right at the start, the Shadow Ball had more force behind it. Yet as I watched, it slowed down as Jangmo kept up the pressure, and then it burst as the Dragon Pulse surged through. But by then, Mimikyu was already charging up another shot. Do it again. I called out, wanting more information, and again the attacks clashed. I understood that time. Once Mimikyu launched the Shadow Ball, that was it. The attack was completely free, giving Mimikyu a chance to move around and attack again. But the beam-like Dragon Pulse was able to be directed by Jangmo, and pumped in more power over time, letting it keep up. Both had benefits and negatives. It was going to be up to me to train my team to use the right move, at the right time. Alright. Good job. Riolu. Rio. Riolu laughed as I chased after her. Get back here, you little brat. I roared, chasing her down. I woke up today to the feeling of smashing my face full of whipped cream. Who had shown Riolu that prank? Where had Riolu even gotten the Pidgey feather? No, that doesn't matter, because I was going to shove this can of whipped cream up Riolu's ass. Victoria. Uncle Leo called out, and I stopped, letting Riolu laugh as she made her escape. I turned to him and pouted, but he did look pleased that I had stopped running. Yes? Please do not run inside the clan home. He spoke and I sighed, and nodded. Probably a good idea. There was expensive stuff in the place I didn't want to break. Oh, look at you. Auntie Melissa cooed, giggling as she walked over. Pulling out a napkin and without hesitating, starting to wipe my face off. It's Riolu's fault. I grumbled, and Auntie Melissa just tittered herself. When I find out who gave her that idea, I grumbled and Auntie Melissa quirked her lips trying to stem a smile. It was probably Elizabeth Deer. What? I said flatly, looking quite annoyed. Elizabeth is rather fond of pranks, she's grown out of doing them, but I remember when she got Leo with this one. I don't know what you are talking about, dear. Uncle Leo said firmly, and while normally I would have laughed at his really bad denial, I was still just irritated. That little brat. A few moments later my face was clean. Ish. Why don't you go wash up? We will be having breakfast soon. Yeah, alright. I grumbled, not wanting to take out my mood on Auntie Melissa. She wasn't so bad. I stomped off, swearing I would get Riolu for this later. After a quick shower and a few minutes cleaning my bed of stray whipped cream, I headed to breakfast. I was already back in training mode. We had been pushing hard, but that was because soon we were going to go for the top. And to prove a point, when I made it outside, I was surprised to see some of my team already working hard. Jangmo was standing beside Stratony, both of them blasting draconic power into the water. I stayed back to watch for a while, just to see what was happening. Slowly both boys each shot, one after another. Then I smiled as I realized they were seeing who was strongest by comparing the sizes of the splash. Their little cheers at defeating the other was cute. I walked over interrupting as I scooped both of them up. So proud of you too. I cheered, rubbing a cheek against Stratony, earning a happy squeal, even as Jangmo protested the attention, until I rubbed my cheek against his own and he went from protesting to sort of faux whining. Teeny. Stratony cheered and I laughed as he coiled around me and hugged me. You both are so cute. Starting training early. Just make sure you both don't overdo it, okay? I reminded and got nods from both of the boys before I settled down and put them back on their feet. Stratony was more than happy to cuddle, but Jangmo stalked off stiff-legged for a minute until he finally turned back towards me, and huffed. I just gave him a big bright smile. You're both growing so much so fast. It'll be time to go do some battle soon. I told them, and both dragons blinked. Teeny? Jang. Yep. I assured them. I figure, once both of you figure out all 3 ways we know of to use Dragon Pulse, I'll take you to the Pokemon Center and let you battle. Both boys blinked and turned to each other, firmly nodding. I smiled as the fire lit up in both of the dragons as they raced off to work on their move. All 3 ways? A voice asked then. 3 that I know of. I answered back as I turned to see Grandpa Roy having followed me to the battle area. That's not something many trainers focus on. It tends to spread the Pokemon a bit thin. Better to focus on one way of doing things so they are focused. Faster to release the move that is needed. Maybe, probably true in most cases, but I think flexibility is important. Besides, I think there is something to teaching them how to adjust the moves as well. Grandpa Roy shrugged and walked over to stand beside me, looking over my Pokemon that now that I was here, were getting ready. Although I noticed Riolu wasn't around. Is she still hiding? I grumbled as I looked around and didn't see her. Arcanine? Can you find Riolu and drag her out here? We have training to do. Arcanine had been staring at the training the whole time, eager to jump in, but knowing it wasn't her turn. The few times she had flared up and tried to train with the little ones, she had sent them scattering and disrupting their efforts. Arc. She seemed to cheer as she jumped to her feet and started sniffing, then she was off. I turned away from the boys, towards where Dragonite was working with my difficult girl. Gible was staring up at Dragonite as she spoke calmly to the little dragon. I wasn't sure what they were talking about, but Dragonite was large and powerful enough. Gible never really stopped paying attention to her when Dragonite was near. Brave was there as well, and seemed to be part of Dragonite's lesson, as Dragonite waved at Brave, who was puffing up a bit as Gible's eyes focused on her. Gib. Goom. Gummy called out, responding to whatever Gible had said. Or hadn't said. She was cute, but real head empty still. Then Gible moved, her mouth open to attack, but Brave responded with a dragon pulse, the energy blasting out of her in the full blast attack, causing Gible's mouth to chomp onto the energy and then be forced away. Gib, she spoke up a few moments later, blinking seemingly in surprise at her new position, as if she didn't know what happened to cause her to be so far away from where she was a moment before. I approached, and settled next to Brave. Dragonite gave me a look and nodded, but then focused on Gible. Dragonite, dragon. She said, and Gib did a slow blink and didn't seem to respond. Goo. Gummy gum. Brave muttered under her breath, seemingly unhappy. Sorry about her. I told Brave, who looked at me a little grumpily. Please forgive her, we are still trying to help her. I offered, and Brave grumbled a bit, but allowed me to pick her up and put her in my lap. Dragon. Dragonite spoke, waving her hand at Gible and sighing a bit. Yeah, I didn't think it would be simple. Gible. Come here. I asked, waving at her, and after a few moments she did rise back up and approach. Can I have your hand? I asked, holding out my hand palm up as she approached, and she stilled as she stared at my fingers. I could see the instinct in her, to attack, fighting against the confusion of the situation. After all, by this point, my hand had given her a lot of good things. Food, attention, and we had done the hand-holding thing a lot by now. So slowly she held out her little hand and placed it on mine. I smiled happily, making sure not to show my teeth as I tugged her a little closer. Gible, this is Brave, our friend. She's going to fight with us. To grow strong and protect all of us together. I explained, and then I gently brought the hand onto Brave's head. Even as she looked at me displeased. But it settled. Gible's little claw touching the top of Gummy's head. See? She isn't going to hurt you if you don't hurt her. We're all friends here. Friends don't hurt. They help. They are nice. I explained softly, and I watched to see how Gible would respond. First she squeezed Gummy, which she didn't seem to like or dislike, and then Gible did it again, and then finally she took her hand away seemingly satisfied, and that was a perfect chance. I pulled out a berry and offered it to Gible. That's right. Good job. I said calmly, and then Gible moved to stuff the food in her mouth, but with a bit of experience I pulled my hand away, but as she opened her mouth after realizing there was nothing inside, I dropped it into her mouth. Gib, she exclaimed softly as she started chewing the berry chunk. Then I offered one to Gummy and Dragonite, then another to Gible as she had been watching the chunks disappear with hunger. After her second chunk she was confused. So I passed more to everyone, ending once more with Gible. See? You don't have to fight for food anymore. There will always be food for my Gible. I told her, and reached out, this time not seeing any food she didn't snap, and started scratching her behind her horns, a place her little hands couldn't reach. Soon I had a mouth open, had empty drooling Gible in my lap, besides Brave, who looked annoyed with having to share. Want to join in the training some more, Brave? You did great on your dragon pulse before. Goom. She confirmed and woogled into a little leap off my lap and then off across the grass to join the boys. Then I looked to Dragonite. Did that go well? I asked her, and Dragonite chuckled out a trilling laugh as she reached down and patted my head. I guess so. Not long after, Arcanine came trotting back. Riolu held by the scruff and dropped the pup in front of me, Arcanine's tail wagging at doing a good job. Alright, Arcanine, why don't you go do some flame training? I still want your fires hotter for the battles ahead. I told her, and before I was finished, she was off in a flash of heat that smacked me in the face. Then I looked to Riolu, who looked like she was going to bail. Don't even think about it. It's training time. If you want to do pranks, you can hide until training time, but you should be here even if you are trying to avoid trouble. Go on. You know what to do. I told her, pointing at the water, and she looked a little surprised at how light I was being. She rose up, swiped the grass off her legs, and then stalked over to the water to join in. Of course, she didn't know I was going to push her into the river later. But that was after training. Pranks and training don't go well together. I'm home, I called out, as I walked inside. Afternoon training with my big team had been fun, but it took a bit of juggling. Lucario had gotten another dose of gravity, and had already started handling it better. Walking around with a bit more ease even if she was still incapable of more than that. I had been forced to leave Jibble in her pokeball after lunch, giving her time to rest, and also so she wouldn't terrorize the rest of my friends without adult supervision. The reason I was home instead of just camping out at the clan house was due to the clan wanting to do some work with the Milotic enclosure. There had been some slight damage to the sides of the stream with the Milotic rubbing against the mud, and so they needed to come in and reinforce the stream so the berry tree section wouldn't get washed away when it rained. So since they were doing that, I had headed home to give my team some home time. I had released everyone outside, and as I walked in to tackle Papa in a hug, I noticed Lucario also wearily following in behind me. Trouble? Papa whispered as he hugged me tightly, and then turned to Lucario and blinked. Oh man. She sure put you through the ringer, didn't she? You look like you just went 12 rounds with a Primeape. Papa told Lucario, who slumped a bit. Oh. Look at you, come in. Mama said, waving Lucario in, and soon Pokemon and people were all resting on the couch. Lucario seemed flattered when Mama came back with a cup of juice that Lucario was sipping from, seemingly quite enjoying it. It was still kinda annoying how quickly she had settled in with my parents. It wasn't fair, but she was happy, and that was the most important part. I ran Lucario through some more G training. I told Papa in a whisper, and he nodded. It's been a while since we hit Arcanine with that. Think we should give him another session? Papa asked, and before I could respond, Arcanine's big head flopped over the back of the couch and just whined at the two of us. Big pleading eyes, just begging not to be put through another Chansey training session. I think Arcanine is plenty strong, Papa, I said, and threw the big pup a wink, and he sent me a doggy grin in return. You really shouldn't take his side trouble. Papa grumbled, but he reached over his shoulder and scratched Arcanine's muzzle. Not doing it for Riolu yet? Papa asked, and I shook my head. No. I made that mistake once before, I said bluntly. Arcanine has amazing battle instincts, but I think she would be even stronger right now if I had given her more time as a Growlithe going to battles and really letting her learn how to beat a superior opponent. That's possible. I've seen her move. She's practically unstoppable, but... Exactly, but she won't always be the strongest, and she has a big weak spot when handling that. I learned my lesson though. Eventually, my team will gain that experience, but it's a lot easier to gain the experience first, then power them up. Heh. Only for you, Trouble, Papa said, hugging me tightly, and honestly, that was fine. This was nice. A note from Sarah's. Kept you waiting, huh? Sorry. Really, things have been so crazy, I just haven't been able to keep up with both stories, and Gitsy is my main focus. Hopefully things calm down and we can return to a normal schedule, but I'm honestly still behind on both stories. Chapter 65. Pillow, stop. I grumbled, half asleep. It was early, the sun wasn't even up, and Pillow had decided that I had taken up too much of my own bed. His cold nose and wet tongue were doing a good job of forcing me away from the warm comfort of my own pillow. He did not in fact stop. Pillow, I growled, opening bleary eyes to see him having already settled down onto my pillow, my new pillow. Where is your pillow? I asked, and he didn't respond, simply yawned as he settled into a comfortable nap. I sat up and blinked, it was dark and I couldn't see. So I got up and turned on the light, wincing at the brightness as I blinked to clear my eyes. I found the issue. You little shit. I grumbled, walking over to the side of my bed where the pillow had fallen off. I don't know how it had fallen off, but that was apparently enough for Pillow to decide in the middle of the night that my pillow was now the better choice. I threw it on top of the bed and glared as Pillow yawned and stretched and pranced over, then settled back onto his chosen pillow. Turning the lights off, I was just crawling back in when I heard the noise and looked out the window. Garridos. I muttered as he was facing the window and breathing hard enough to fog the window up. What are you doing up? I asked sleepily, but I didn't get an answer, and I wasn't just going to leave him out there. I walked over and opened the window, earning a happy wiggle from my biggest boy. You should be asleep, Blue Heart. I told him as I stroked his nose, but he made no motion to retreat. He must have heard me grumbling at Pillow and thought I was up. I looked over at my clock and after blinking a few times I got my eyes to actually focus and saw it was just before 6. This is truly a cursed hour. I muttered, the sun wasn't even up. Stupid winter. Garridos throated a purring noise that earned my full attention. He wasn't the most vocal of my friends, but it made when he did make noise for what he wanted all the more important. Hungry? I asked, and he teetered, telling me no. Bored? No. He continued to just stare at me, and finally I understood. Okay. I assured him as I moved away. Quickly grabbing some socks, then doubling them up just in case. Slipping into my favorite clunky boots. I grabbed my jacket and slipped into that. Then once I was sure I would be warm, I stepped out of my window and onto his crest. He was lonely. I held on to him as we worked back towards the stream, and then he settled on the inner island, under the berry trees, just staring out into the open field. I rested back gently, scritching him underneath his horns, as we just relaxed, him half in the stream to keep himself comfortable, resting his jaw on the grass and then slowly. The sun rose, the whole time the two of us simply enjoyed each other's presence. It was a good morning. Coo-coo-coo, was the response that greeted me as Dragonite landed at the stable. Mimikyu? I asked as he ran right up to me and leapt into my arms. I jostled a bit as he crawled up to my shoulder and then with his shadowy arm he pointed towards the house urgently. Okay. I said, starting to move before remembering other than Dragonite everyone was in their pokeball. I spun a bit, throwing out all the pokeballs on my hip. Dragonite. Chansey. Start everyone's training for now, okay? Then I faced forward and hurried into the clan house. I bypassed Grandpa Roy, who was out on the porch with a wave, as Mimikyu guided me right towards my room. As I entered, he leapt off and landed on the bed and sort of wiggled a bit like he was nervous before patting the bed next to him. I jumped, and as I did, he nodded and then leapt off, surprising me. But then he rushed into the closet, peeking out one last time to make sure I was sitting, and then he disappeared. Oh. I whispered, practically feeling the stars in my eyes. Mimikyu's costume was done. I settled in to wait, and didn't have to wait long. Then slowly the door opened, the light on behind him, giving the shadow the first thing through, and then he walked out in an uncomfortable shuffle. Eee. I released, and before he could react, I was off the bed and scooping him up and spinning around in delight. So cute. I cheered as I held him out to arm's length to see. Mimikyu looked like Milotic. He made a Milotic costume. I'm dying. Eee. I squealed as I wrapped him back into a hug and spun around and around. You are such a cutie. By this point my affection was having an effect and Mimikyu was starting to cry, hugging me tighter and tighter, but it didn't matter, because I had the cutest Mimikyu of them all. You are amazing. Look at this. I finally managed to break out of the spiral of cuteness to settle on my knees with Mimikyu on the bed in front of me. The tail is so well done. And oh. Are those actual Milotic scales? Cuckoo. He said, showing off the tail of his costume. They weren't the prism scales, but Milotic had more than just those. He had sewn a few of their more normal scales into the tail of the costume, and I noticed it twitch around. I reached out and gently explored and nodded. Using your wood hammer to move the tail? Cuckoo. He confirmed, and I flashing him a bright smile at how smart he was. Arceus above, this is so cute, and well made. We have to show everyone. I bet that lady at the arts and crafts store is going to lose her mind over this. I told him, and I could see him wiggle in embarrassment, but no way, was I not going to show off his work. Come on, let's show everyone. I bet all the Milotic will be so flattered. And I hauled him up and out of the house, jumping right onto the grass outside. Everyone! Come look! I shouted out, and got a lot of startled looks, but I kneeled down and settled Mimikyu onto the grass, letting him show off his new costume to everyone. The head didn't creak anymore. The bottom of the costume I noticed was thicker, so it wouldn't rip while moving across the ground. As he had folded it, and it seemed to be tighter near the bottom, making it harder for someone to just lift up the edge. Stupid researcher, making Mimikyu worried about that sort of thing. But it was cute. He even had the little horn, and 2 red strands of cloth on each side to represent the fins. So cute. The eyes were little buttons. Everyone gathered around, and started chattering away. Chansey was clapping delighted at the sight of it, and Dragonite made a cute little squealing noise and made grabby hands, but kept herself from picking up Mimikyu for a dragon hug. Dratini was the most vocal as he ran around Mimikyu, cheering out little dragon noises of happiness. Milotic, my boy, blinked down at Mimikyu in surprise, and then after a bit of trilling and eldritch talk back and forth, Milotic started wheezing out his laugh, seeming quite happy with the choice. The flock also got involved. Those who obviously helped Mimikyu with scales cheered him with an orchestral-sounding song that had him using his ghostly claws to press onto his eyes holes in embarrassment. But overall, it was a good moment. A moment that I hoped Mimikyu would remember for the rest of his life. That he had nothing to be afraid of anymore. He would never be lonely again. Dragon Pulse! I called out, and my little dragons did so. Jangmo was first. His Dragon Pulse was the orb-shaped attack. The energy gathered up a very pretty turquoise color, and then blasted out, slamming into the water with a splashing roar. Dratini went next, trilling as it gathered power, and a moment later a roaring dragon beam burst forth. It zigged and zagged, under Dratini's control, and then smashed into the water, but he didn't just stop. Dratini kept it up, letting the power continue to pulse from him. It had his cute little rings of power that trailed around the central beam. Something Water Pulse often had, but I couldn't see in any of the other dragons move. Then it ended and Dratini was still fired up. He looked to me, and I nodded. My proud smile had him trilling happily. Then Brave leapt forward yelling as purple energy roared out, a complete Dragon Pulse. The energy came from all around her, and just before she hit the water, it rushed out, pushing the water away from her and letting her land in the mud below. Then her pulse ended and she turned around to show off when the water came rushing back in and sending her rolling in the waves. A few moments later, she came out of the water, laughing and giggling. All right. I agree. A deal is a deal. I called out and all 3 of them looked up at me with wide eyes. You're ready for battle. I called out, and the 3 dragons cheered. Even Brave had been excited at the idea of going out and having real battles. Especially now that she had a strong attack. Goom. She cheered, woogling up and down happily. Suddenly Riolu came sliding in front of me, and pointed her paw at herself. Riolu. Yes, Riolu. I'll take you as well. I agreed, and her eyes sparkled at the idea of battles, before realizing who it was that she was looking at, and she crossed her arms and huffed. You'll have to listen to me, if you want to battle. I reminded her, but I didn't get a response back. Instead I looked at the rest. Mimikyu looked excited and I nodded to him as well. That's right. Let's go do some battles. I roared and my little team roared alongside me. Other than Riolu, who puffed herself up looking arrogant and haughty. I nodded. It was time. Returning everyone, I took a moment to register which team was the one I was currently using, and then I grabbed my stuff and raced out of the clan house. A few of the old ladies and people along the street selling things waved at me, and despite how weird it was as I barely knew them, I waved back as I raced out of the clan compound, and down the dusty street. It felt weird needing to run myself, but well. Arcanine was stuck at home for now. Doing okay, Mimikyu? I asked as I ran, and he cheered from my shoulder. His Milotic costume's tail bounced along with my pace, and he sounded happy. Coo. That's the spirit. I called back and then continued on. It didn't take long before I raced down the street and found the Pokémon Center, taking a moment to catch my breath just outside. I watched the battle square. It was right across the street from the Pokémon Center, and I could see battles were already taking place. Once my breath was caught, I headed across. I was so excited. Would I lose? Would my team struggle and pull through against crazy odds? I didn't know. And that was exciting. Unluckily, this was Fuchsia City, and not Celadon. There were only half a dozen people here to battle, most of them kids, but one was an older man in a suit that seemed quite happy to watch the battle happen, a Pidgeotto on his knee. I made myself known walking over to the little section by the stands, where the battlers were gathered. Anyone looking for a match? I asked, and got a couple of little kid glares at my offer. It was like I was back in school with all the kids ready to battle at a pin drop. Yeah, I'll take you on. I'm Ikamaru, and I won't lose. He called out. The boy was nearly shaved bald, with just a prickling of hair on his head to cover him. It made me kinda giggle, but either way, I was in. You got it. And we raced to one of the battle zones. All right. He called out, pulling out a Pokeball that likely belonged to a family pet. Go Zubat. He called out, and I blinked at the odd Pokemon. Then again, this was Fuchsia. The kid was probably the son of a ninja. Nice. Alright. Mimikyu. Let's go. Time to test out your new costume. And then my shoulder Pokemon leapt off and landed with a small puff of air on the course. What? What is that? Some doll? You can't fight with a Poke doll. Itchy cried out, and I laughed. He's not a doll, but a Pokemon. Mimikyu, send a Shadow Ball into the court. I called, and then the energy gathered quickly and smashed into the dirt in front of him, kicking up rocks, and making Itchy's eyes widen in shock. What Pokemon is that? I've never seen it before. Itchy called out, and I could see more and more of the people around coming to see as well. Mimikyu. He's a ghost, fairy-type Pokemon. I called out, and the boy frowned before pulling out a familiar stack of papers out of his pocket. He opened it to the first few pages and took a bit to look through it. There's no such thing as a fairy type. The Pokédex says so. He demanded at me, like I was lying to him. Giggling a bit, I smiled. It's real. No one really knows much about it here in Kanto, but it's a real typing. Poison, or steel type attacks are strong against it, but it's strong against bug, dark, and fighting. I left out dragon. Mimikyu is also ghost type, so add those onto its strengths and weaknesses. This kid didn't have any dragon types after all, no point in mentioning it. Itchy took a moment to try to figure out what he should use, but instead just nodded. Battle start. He called out, and I nodded. Shadow Ball. Zubat, use Poison Fang. Itchy called out slower, and the two attacks met. Mimikyu's Shadow Ball shot forward, nearly howling through the wind as the energy was compacted well, and to my delight, it wasn't fast enough. Zubat, ignoring Itchy's orders, dodged the attack first, seemingly ignoring the call to attack. Only then did it move in for a bite. Purple fangs appeared around its mouth as it moved in, but Mimikyu and I weren't done. Fend it off, buddy. I called, and Mimikyu's Shadow Claw flew out and scratched at the air, causing Zubat to flinch back from the strike. You can do it, Zubat. Itchy roared out, putting all his faith in his Pokemon. I couldn't do anything less. You can do it, Mimikyu. I roared, arm raised up, and Mimikyu spun around, revealing the shadow ball he was generating with his other hand while keeping the Zubat away with the other. It rocked out, and Zubat couldn't quite dodge it, knocking the Zubat away, and then to my delight, it wasn't over. Zubat was able to continue. Use Supersonic. Itchy called out, and I winced, because one, that was really loud. And two? It was a bad call. Normal attacks don't work on Ghost. I called out, but with the noise I doubt Itchy could hear me. Instead, Mimikyu just gathered up another Shadow Ball and fired it off. Having already been clipped, Zubat was struck fully this time, unable to dodge, and it hit the dirt with a shriek. Zubat. Itchy called out, and I pressed a finger against my ears to clear out the ringing sound. A moment later, Zubat was returned, and Itchy glared at me before turning and running to the Pokémon Center. But I just sent him a wave before turning to Mimikyu, who jumped into my arms with a happy cry. "You did it, buddy!" I called out, spinning around and letting Mimikyu enjoy his moment. "Impressive. I've never seen such a Pokémon before." The old man with the Pidgeotto called back, and I flashed him a grin. "Come battle me, and I'll show you a few more." Then to my delight, the old man did just that, rising up with Pidgeotto flying to the ring first. Once he was there, he nodded. "All right. Jangmo-o!" I called out. My armored dragon appeared with a cute little roar. Then he focused up, sensing the battle ahead, scratching his claws into the dirt. "Interesting Jangmo-o, you said?" "Yep. A dragon-type Pokémon," I said, pleased, and then doubly pleased at the old man's surprised look. "Indeed?" And he nodded. "Let's begin. Jangmo-o, show off your power. Let's go." Pidgeotto, sand attack. And the two pit their attacks against each other. Jangmo-o was slower, and by the time his orb dragon pulse was ready, the sand was already slamming into his face, starting to blinding him. His attack shot off, arcing through the sky, but with a wingtip the Pidgeotto missed, the attack leaving a trail through the kicked-up sand. "It's okay, buddy. Try again," I called, and the old man wasn't done. "Use Gust." Jangmo-o was struck. Once more Pidgeotto was just too fast, but that was okay. He buckled down his claws, gripping the dirt, and kept it from launching him away, although I could tell it still wore him out, the wind smashing into him. He launched his second Dragon Pulse, and this time it cut through the wind and struck the faster Pokémon. Pidgeotto definitely felt it, as it was rocked to the side, but it didn't hit the floor, and continued to stay in the air. "Quick attack," the old man called, and I had a split second. "Protect. Don't let him push you around." And Jangmo-o roared as the shield appeared, causing Pidgeotto to crash into the immovable force for a moment. "Dragon Tail," I called out, and Jangmo-o spun to make the attack. At the same moment Pidgeotto swept both wings and launched itself back into the sky. The dragon tail missed, carving a line in the dirt. "Impressive," the old man called. "But I believe this is where it ends." "Pidgeotto Twister," the old man called out the dragon-type move, and I knew that he was right. Win or lose, here it was. Dragon Pulse. Blast the energy away, Jangmo-o. Don't let this bird push you around. I watched as Jangmo-o started gathering power, even as the dragon-type winds rushed down. I watched as he squatted down, and continued gathering energy, even as the twister came closer and closer. He stared down the attack, and then I realized what Jangmo-o was planning. The twister hit, even as the dragon pulse grew larger and larger. He let it strike him, let it knock him around, and then Jangmo-o raised his head to the sky, straight into the twister, and launched the orb. It cut through the weaker twister, punching right through, and then slamming into Pidgeotto. The cry of pain was loud, but the battle was over. Jangmo-o slumped into the dirt, panting and exhausted, but he had gotten the attack through. I rushed forward, and picked up Jangmo-o, who whined a bit at how exhausted he was as I picked him up. Curling him onto his back, I held him gently, checking for injuries. "You did it. I'm so amazed. That was awesome," I whispered to him as I held him to my chest, even as Pidgeotto flew overhead before fluttering its wings to land on the old man's shoulder. "Jang," he muttered weakly, and I leaned in and nuzzled him. "No. It was amazing. That Pidgeotto had all the advantages, but you still knocked it around. Way to go. Jang," he muttered, still weakly but a bit happier. "Go ahead and return, buddy. Get some rest." He disappeared in a flash of light, and I nodded to the older man. "You have more Pokémon than just your Pidgeotto?" I asked, and the old man smirked. "I do." "Great. Then let's continue." I moved back to the trainer area and grabbed another Pokeball. This time it was Dratini's turn. He appeared and trilled a happy welcome, and then looked around, spotting the Pidgeotto and sending it a happy trill in greeting, before turning more serious and whistling a warning. He was trying to sound like a tough guy, but it was a cute little whistle. Adorable. But while the Pidgeotto just remained ready, the old man's face had gone slack. Is that Dratini? Oh, don't worry, I'm not a member of the Blackthorn. Kanto has their own dragon master now, I said, poking my chest proudly. I was the only dragon trainer in Kanto, and so I was able to give myself the title. Good job, Vicky. Heh. Dragon master? The old man asked, and then chuckled loudly. Very well. Let's test you. Battle start. I called, and the old man reacted. Twister. Dragon Pulse. I called and Dratini didn't have the same issue as Jangmo with the move. The purple twister shot down, but Dratini's dragon-headed beam erupted out. Weakly at first, as it struck the twister, getting tangled and pushed back, but then Dratini continued to give his little roar, and the beam grew wider and wider. Soon before Twister reached it fully formed, pushing through the other dragon-type move. Dodge. The old man called this time, seeing what was happening, and Pidgeotto jerked to the side. The twister stopped, never reaching Dratini, but that wasn't the right call this time. The dragon beam zigged and zagged and homed in on Pidgeotto, who hadn't dodged far enough that the beam couldn't adjust to it. The dragon pulse outran the bird and it cried out as it was flung through the air as the dragon energy slammed into Pidgeotto. But even then, it wasn't done. Impressive move. I wasn't expecting that. Did you train your Pokemon to use a different move? Nope. Both moves are Dragon Pulse. Some dragons just use the move in different forms. I told you. I'm a dragon master, I said proudly, even if I was mostly joking. Dratini. Once again. I won't hold back then. Pidgeotto. Use Aerial Ace. Dratini. Dragon Pulse, push it away. There was no dodging Aerial Ace normally, you just had to blunt the attack or knock it aside. Unfortunately, Dratini's Dragon Pulse was too weak. It didn't grow fast enough, and so when it did strike the charging bird, the energy of Aerial Ace blew right through. The beam split at the power of Pidgeotto's beak splicing through, and then finally as it started to grow strong, it was too late. Dratini cried as he was knocked aside, and when it was over, Dratini was laying on the dirt knocked out. His poor eyes were swirling. Dratini, return. I called out, bringing him back, as there was still dust and other stuff smacking around the dirt lot. His Dragon Pulse had picked up power just near the end, but had still split and dug grooves in the dirt. Good work. That was amazing, I whispered and then looked up at the old man. His Pidgeotto had landed on his shoulder, and I could see the bird was breathing heavily. It was definitely worn out. Your Pidgeotto is so strong. I couldn't help but gush, and the old man laughed. But I wasn't joking. That Pidgeotto was actually really strong. Probably close to evolving for sure. She's a strong one, all right. Those dragons of yours. They're young? Yep. Just little ones. These are their first battles, I confirmed happily, and the man blinked in shock. You should have told me, I wouldn't have gone so hard. He called out in return, and I just laughed at that. No way. They are dragons. When they are all set up, they are going to be so excited to grow strong enough to beat you. You did them a huge favor. There was always a worry that a Pokemon would take a loss badly. But I knew my dragons had plenty of support, and I would assure them through it all regardless. This had been what I wanted. A loss. A loss meant they would learn. They would have a challenge, and grow to overcome it. This was perfect. Hey, you want to try your other Pokemon? I still have a few more Pokemon that need some battles. I thought you would never ask. The old man offered happily, returning his Pidgeotto, and to my utter and complete delight, releasing one of my favorite Pokemon, Charmander. A note from Sarah's. Sorry about the wait. I've had a rough while, but I managed to get in the mood for PTV and basically got through an entire chapter today. Chapter 66. Goom. Brave roared as she pulsed, knocking the flames of a flamethrower away as she charged right into Charmander's fire. The draconic energy swept the flame away and let Brave charge right into the surprised lizard's face. Then she roared and a water gun slammed into Charmander's face, earning a cry of pain. Huh, I didn't even know she had that move. Back off, Gummy, quick, I called, and Brave hesitated a bit too long. Charmander rose up, and the old man called out, Dragon Breath. Charmander instantly attacked, a burst of purple flames shot out, and washed over Brave, who cried out at the super effective move. Brave wavered and fell back. Return, I called out, and Brave disappeared. I smiled at the Pokeball. Good job, Brave. You're amazing, we'll keep working on it. I promise. Then I replaced the ball and grabbed another. It's your turn, Riolu, I called out, and Riolu hit the floor, before looking around in surprise, before seeing the Pokemon opposite her. Rio. Riolu, she called out, pointing in shock, looking around, and then at me. Yeah, it's a battle, silly, I told her, and she jolted at the word before shaking and then throwing both arms into the air. Ryu, is everything alright? It's our first battle together, that's all. Riolu, focus up, let's use what you learned, okay? I explained to the old man, who nodded, still looking pleased. Very well. Charmander. Flamethrower. Vacuum wave, I called out, but as something I should have expected. Riolu is a little shit, and instead of attacking with vacuum wave, she yelped and ran away from the flamethrower that went at her. Riolu. Vacuum wave back. Push back the fire, I called, but she didn't listen to me, instead continuing to try and dodge the attack, before finally she didn't quite get away. Ryu, she yelped, holding her, but as the fire burned her, and then she got angry. I sighed, as I realized she wasn't going to listen to me at all. She charged, her claws glowing with a metal claw, which was a terrible choice of course, but Riolu was angry and not listening. She charged in, and thanks to some tumbles managed to get close even as Charmander continued to blast fire at her, slamming a metal claw into Charmander's face, causing the poor lizard to yelp at the scratches on his face. Then he roared and blasted an even larger flamethrower into Riolu's face. I winced as she was launched back, sputtering and rolling, and already close to being out. Riolu, you have to listen in a battle. Vacuum wave this time, I called, but she turned to look at me with a glare, before turning back to Charmander, and I almost returned her there. But I held off. If she wanted to do this herself, then I wouldn't interfere. Riolu's body highlighted as she tried a quick attack, getting in around the flamethrower, but it wasn't enough. A moment later, Charmander hit her with a scratch of his own, and she cried out, falling to the ground as she skidded across the earth. She was done. I called out a return and sighed. I think that means you win, I told the old man, who looked a little embarrassed. Your Pokemon, Riolu? Will she be alright? Oh yeah, we don't get along great. We'll have to sit down and have a talk soon, I think, I said with a shrug. Well, young lady, it was a fun battle, he assured me, and I just smiled. It was. I haven't lost in a long time, old man. So you better be proud. I'll let you tell people you defeated me, I told him, joking. Huh. Well, young one, all journeys start slow, he offered, but hesitated. I've never seen many of your Pokemon. I traveled out of Kanto to a distant land and made lots of new friends, I explained proudly. They're all young and need experience, so I brought them here to get some. The old man nodded, smiling as he reached out and patted my shoulder. Impressive, young one. Why don't we get our Pokemon healed up, and I'm sure there are others that wish to battle you. Yeah. It'll be great, I cheered happily. And I was happy. Win or lose, who cared? My Pokemon would get stronger, but more importantly, I looked around the crowd, and felt like I was just like the other kids. Sure, my Pokemon were rare, and I had a full set, but most of the kids here were about the same level of power. I felt like I was just another kid spending an afternoon after school battling today. I smiled as I rushed off to the Pokemon Center. A bit of healing, and I just knew my dragons would be ready for round 2. Riolu, on the other hand, needed a talk. Satisfied? I asked Riolu after releasing her. We were inside the Pokemon Center break room. I had decided a more comfortable environment would work best. Riolu, after popping out, had instantly jumped onto the couch and bounced a bunch. Riolu really liked soft things. But she was ignoring me now. Riolu, I prompted, and again, she ignored me, just bouncing happily and pretending I wasn't there. Okay. I'll take you back to the stable. You're still welcome to stay, as Lucario is training with me. But we're done. I answered back bluntly. Getting a reaction. Rio. Her shocked gasp didn't make me change my mind. Riolu, I want to train you. I told Lucario I would make you a strong Pokemon. But part of that is listening to me during training and battles. I can't train you if you don't listen to me. Rio. Riolulu. She argued, and it took me a second to understand what she was getting at. She was making the motions for vacuum wave and then a denial. See, that's where you are wrong. I told her bluntly. Getting a glare from the pup. Your vacuum wave is the move I've had you practice the most, remember? It's gotten strong. Against Charmander, one of three things would have happened. You'd overpower the flamethrower. Be overpowered by the flamethrower. Or the attacks would cancel out. I explained, offering up 3 fingers, and she just scoffed in turn. Riolu. Lu. If your attack overpowered Charmander, you'd have the advantage. I explained, then lowered a finger. If he overpowered you, at least the attack would have been blunted, using up so much energy getting through your own attack, and giving you a chance to dodge. If it was even, then Charmander would have no choice to switch to close combat moves. You noticed it, didn't you? Charmander used Scratch. It didn't have a lot of experience in battle either. Rrrrrrr, she growled, arms crossed, and I sighed. I wasn't getting through to her. She was being defensive. Her refusal to listen wasn't a matter of logic. She just didn't want to listen, so she didn't. So we're back to the start. Do you want to find another trainer, or just wait until Lucario is ready to leave? I asked, and Riolu blinked at the sudden question. I'm not going to kick you out, but if you don't want to stay, then Lucario probably won't stay for long either. I told Lucario I would train you, but I can't do that. Rio. She grumbled as she rose up and then just paced back and forth for a bit. Riolu. Lu. She then pointed at herself and flexed her arms and pointed at me, and stuck her tongue out. Then to my surprise, she got a bit worked up. Rio. Riolulu Rio, Riolu. Rio Ri. She chattered away, pointing, and I nodded, breathing in and out. I get the issue now. You want to know why you aren't doing the same training as Lucario? I said, and Riolu nodded. Rio. She punching her chest, and I nodded. Okay, this wasn't just Riolu being a brat, but her actually being upset that I was training Lucario, but not putting Riolu through the same training. She was confused and defensive. Okay. Fine. Let me explain it. The reason you aren't doing the same training as your mother is because if we did that training, you would get pretty strong, and then it would take you 10 times as long to get any stronger. She blinked at my explanation and scoffed. I'm serious. Arcanine. Milotic, even Dragonite to a lesser extent. I made a mistake in my training of them. I had them get too strong too fast, too specialized. I didn't focus on making all of their abilities strong, instead I overfocused. I pointed a finger right at her nose, which had her crossing her eyes to stare at it. I'm not holding you back. I'm making sure that when you evolve, you will be unbeatable. She looked from finger to my eyes, then she scoffed at me. She stood up on the couch and slapped a paw to her chest again. Rio. She said, sounding overly proud and looking down haughtily at me. Riolu. I'm not going to fight you over this. I told her. Not this. This is too serious. Being a Pokemon trainer is important to me. I had told myself long before I became a trainer, I wouldn't do an Ash and Charizard. If a Pokemon didn't want to be on my team, I wouldn't force it. I'm not going to send you into a battle if we can't work together, plain and simple. I looked at her, and she looked at me, and I knew. We didn't have the connection of trainer and Pokemon. It wasn't like with the others, where I knew we were unified in purpose. Riolu was too headstrong and we still didn't get along. Not that I had really done too much to change that. I had treated her respectfully while training, but we still pranked each other outside of it. Do you want to battle with me? I offered this time for maybe the first time actually speaking to Riolu directly. This time I wasn't agreeing to Lucario, who was pressuring her daughter, but speaking to the Pokemon that I think I could eventually get along with. Most of the time. Probably. She looked at my offered hand in surprise. And then our eyes met. I was serious, and I did my best to convey that. For a moment, there was something there. It felt like Riolu was more than before. That there was an understanding between us that was beyond just the physical. Riolu was testing me, I think. Whatever she found, she huffed a moment later and stood up, landing on her feet off the couch and putting her hands on her hips as she peered up at me before finally she nodded. Reaching out, she placed a paw in my hand. I blinked. She blinked. Paw beans. I gasped in delight. I had never seen the inside of Riolu's paw before, and while it was curled in sort of like a fist, it had little pink beans. Rio. So cute. I cooed, and she was definitely unhappy with me as she glared back as she tore her paw away from me. Ah. I wanted to push them some more. I whined, and she scoffed, putting both paws behind her back like she was protecting them from me. Heh. I'd get those beans someday. I shook it off. Right, it was time to test our fresh agreement. There's a Charmander out there that needs an ass whooping. I informed Riolu, who jerked at my language, before her muzzle split into a sinister smile. Let's go kick some ass. Together. Rio. Oh? Back again? Yep. Riolu and I want a rematch if that's okay. I called out to the old man that was once more resting on the stands around the battlefields. There were 2 kids fighting with Pidgey and Rattata right now, but that battle would end soon. He looked at Riolu, seemingly checking her over, and then he nodded. Very well. I can't deny that I'm interested in seeing more of your strange Pokemon. He offered with a gentle smile. I smiled back sharply, noticing Riolu was sharing my look. The old man blinked at our smiles, but seemed to just accept it as is. A few moments later, the kids cleared the arena, and Riolu and I took our position. Go Charmander. The old man called and Charmander cheered happily as it appeared, looking around with a gentle look until it saw Riolu, and then moved into a battle position, mouth full of teeth. Char. Begin. The old man called out, and I threw out a hand. Vacuum wave. This time my call out was heated, and even as Charmander prepped a flamethrower at the old man's call, Riolu shifted sideways, gathering power at her hip. Truly, the Kamehameha wave position was the strongest of all. And then as the stream of fire left Charmander, the flame was wide, but not well concentrated. Charmander was young. And then with a roar as the flames were about to reach her, Riolu cried out. Ryu! And thrust her vacuum wave forward. The attack struck the flames and blew straight through it, splitting the fire that suddenly sprayed wildly as it was punched through. Charmander didn't even see it, too focused on the flamethrower. The vacuum wave slammed into his face, rocking the poor cutie lizard back and sending him rolling on the dusty lot, a cry of pain escaping him. Rio! Riolu cheered happily at the reversal of the last match. Quick attack! I called out, as Charmander rose up, and Riolu jerked, looking like she was going to hesitate, before she glowed white and burst forward in a blur of speed. Charmander! Use flamethrower! Force her back! The old man called and Charmander tried, but quick attack was too much for him. Riolu appeared, slamming into the Charmander, knocking them both into the dirt, but Riolu had just landed another strong attack, and Charmander was feeling it. Vacuum wave! I called out, as Charmander rose onto his arms and legs, and made to just blast the area around her. Rio! Do it! Then use the gathered energy as a shield. I called out and Riolu instantly slammed her paws together in front of her, and then as she stretched them apart, the whine of the vacuum wave starting up whistled over the arena, and when Charmander burst with a flamethrower, instead of slamming right into Riolu, it slammed into the orb of spinning energy, and suddenly it was sucked in and reflected, and flame spun crazily, not that it left Riolu entirely untouched. Launch it! I called, and Riolu winced as she adjusted her grip on the attack and then sent it forward. It wasn't as strong as it could have been, it had been weakened considerably by the flamethrower, and how quickly Riolu had brought it forth, but she had trained for days on this one move, learning how to compress the energy she put into the vacuum wave to enhance its strength. And Riolu also really wanted to win. Char. The poor lizard hunkered down to try and last through the attack, but it ended up sprawling, knocked around. The dust took a moment to clear it. Riolu was ready, paws clenched into fists and ready for another attack, but as it all cleared away Charmander was slumped looking knocked out. Charmander, return. The old man called and Riolu looked up in shock looking from him to me, and I was smiling happily. You won, I assured her, and Riolu brightened, leaping into the air and cheering at her victory. A moment later she was next to me and leaping, and we spun around for a second as we both laughed in delight at our victory. Then she was once more on her feet as I put her down and she looked up at me. I looked down at her. She swung a fist into my side. You little. I growled as I bent over from the blow, and she burst into laughter. Re. She mocked me, arms wrapped around her stomach as she laughed at me. Are you all right? The old man asked, hurrying over looking shocked, but I waved him off. I'm fine. Riolu, you little brat. I grumbled at her, rubbing my side. She just smirked at me, but I could see the energy flowing through her. She was incredibly excited to win. Return. I called out and she disappeared. I'd have to find Lucario soon to let Riolu gush to her mom about her first victory. The old man was looking down at me with a concerned look on his face. Riolu barely tapped me. I assured him. She's a bit of a prankster, and we don't always get along. That was just her way of telling me, don't think it means we are best friends. I told him. Besides, if she really hit me, I would be sending her into the ground. I told him, patting my bicep with one hand. I see. He spoke, but didn't seem like he agreed. How's Charmander? Oh, he's doing fine. A rest and he'll be happy as ever. You gave him a good battle. Thanks. You're pretty good at battles. I offered him, and the man had a little wistful smile on his face. Oh, I was quite good in my youth. Not someone a youngster would know. I was no Blaine, but I did well on my journey. Your own must be going well. To have so many strange Pokemon. It's been interesting. I decided for a moment, thinking back on all that I had done. I hadn't really thought much about the journey as a whole, but looking at the old man who was reminiscing, I guess it'll be something I think about all my life. But mine isn't over yet. The league first, and then maybe a new region. New Pokemon and friends and enemies to make. The man let out a laugh that caught him off guard. I don't think making enemies is normally a part of the journey. Heh. They're just doing it wrong then. I decided, smiling brightly. Now, I still had some more friends to give some training to. I looked around and nodded. Hey you! I yelled until my eyes met with another kid. Our eyes met. That means we have to battle. I proclaimed, and the boy looked confused for a minute before scoffing. You sound like an old lady. Shut up and fight me. Proclamation complete, I sent a wave at the old man who tipped his hat to me, as he walked back over to the bleachers and settled in to watch. Back home. I was going over everyone's experience, while also doing some skinship. You were very good. I told Brave as I squeezed her a little. We'll work on Dragon Pulse some more, but you really caught that Rattata off guard. It was very impressive. Goom. She delighted as I showered her with attention and discussion about what we had done wrong and what we could do better. Of course there was a problem that I was ignoring. I smiled down at Brave, even as warm breath was huffed across the back of my neck. What's that? Something behind me? You must be mistaken. I continued to shower Brave with affection. Grrrr. Someone must have left a motor on somewhere. I muttered blankly, and then went back to telling Brave about what her tackle had looked like from my point of view. I ignored the massive cold nose, pressed right into the back of my neck. Nope. It didn't exist. Just like the Arcanine who had been absolutely locked onto my ass for the last 10 minutes, definitely wasn't there. Nope. She certainly wasn't throwing a tantrum after missing out on battles. That couldn't be. Finally, Arcanine seemed to realize I wasn't paying attention to her, and she reacted. Arc. She whined, flopping back loudly and then rolling back and forth while howling. I of course was struck by her tail multiple times, which I couldn't ignore. Knocked around by Tail Whip, I put Brave down and looked at Arcanine, who was having a tantrum. Why are you acting like a baby? I asked her without giving in at all. Arcanine stopped rolling, her howling ended, and she looked at me pleading. Yeah, you can't trick me. I know you weren't throwing an actual tantrum. You just wanted attention, so I would go find a battle for you. I narrowed my eyes. Jangmo's tantrum must have been noticed by my too smart for her own good dog. No, it didn't work. Arc. She held, returning to rolling around like she was dying. What is going on out here? Uncle Leo called out as he stomped out, looking shocked at the sight of Arcanine and I. I was crouching beside her with my chin in my hand as I watched dispassionately. Arcanine is throwing a faux tantrum because she didn't get to battle. Even if she knows they were battles for the little ones. I reminded her, but that only made her stop rolling to look at me, with a pleading look. I'm not going to find a challenge for you right now. I'm still giving after-action reports to all the little ones. Arc. She held again, and I realized I wasn't going to be able to ignore her. Better stand back, Uncle Leo. I offered as I rose up and then leapt. Arke. She squealed as I leapt right onto her belly and grabbed on. What's this? It can't be my strong girl who never loses a fight. No, she wouldn't be crying and whining like a baby, right? I asked, making her pay attention to me, and in that moment as I turned it around, Arcanine went still, all of her howling and playing over as she then changed tactics. She started pretending I wasn't there. Shifting her head away from me even as I tried to meet our eyes. Oh? What's this? I wondered as I continued wiggling around trying to get her to look at me, but she refused. Finally I huffed and nodded. That's what I thought. If my battle pup is a good girl, I'll try and find some good warm-up matches before the league. I said, and that earned me her full attention and her tail waking up going full speed. Yeah, don't give me that look. I told her, reaching out to push her muzzle away, only she wiggled around until she was staring at me, and then our new game was made. I didn't notice when Uncle Leo left, but at least the noise was over. Come on, you great pile of fluff. You can help me explain to the little ones about battles. I decided. It wasn't exactly what she wanted, but it was good enough. A note from Sarah's. Thank you for being patient. Chapter 67. The next day, after finishing up a new improved training for the little ones, I changed into travel clothes. Are you sure? I asked, as I put on my hat and looked over at Lucario. Lou. She agreed, giving me a firm nod. There had been a shift in dynamic after Riolu and I had battled together. Riolu had gushed so much about the battle, despite our clashing, that Lucario had surprised me last night. She had asked to take part in a battle as well. How could I refuse? I had been planning an expedition anyway. I held out her pokeball, and she tapped it with her paw, disappearing inside. Cuckoo. A forlorn noise came from the porch and I looked over to see that Mimikyu was slumped, despite still wearing his Milotic costume. Oh honey. I whispered as I walked over, uncaring that I technically had a meeting scheduled. My little guy would always take my attention first. I walked over and sat down, and then pulled off my hat and flopped it down on top of him. Cuckoo? I'm sorry. I told him. I know you want to come with me, but it'll just be for a short time. I'll be back before you know it. He peeked up at me from beneath my straw hat, and it was silent pouting saying that wasn't true that made me reach down and pick him up. Forever and ever. I reminded him with a whisper. Leaning into the hug of his shadow arms as he wrapped me in a hug. I've gone home before. It's just like that. You'll see. I'll be back soon, and we'll have new stories to share, and I'll be so happy to see you. I'll hold my arms out and hug you so tight just like now. Coo. Of course I promise. It's just a short trip. A few days. I pulled the hat off him and instead nuzzled my right into him. You're my friend. I wish I could take you with, but I can only take 6 Pokemon with me for this. He slowly nodded into my chest but didn't stop hugging me. It was cute how dependent he was acting. He hadn't seemed to worry when I was just going between home and stable, but when I told him I was going out somewhere else, it had freaked him out a little. Cuck. He finally, slowly untangled from me and hopped off, landing beside me, and sort of refusing to look at me. So of course I had to figure out a way to perk him up. You know. There is something, I said, humming a bit as I considered it. Well, you know what? I was basically pulling a full come at me, bro. Why not take it a step farther? So, can you do that for me? I asked, and Mimikyu this time puffed up. I smiled softly as I patted him on the head. He just needed some assurance I would be back. It was silly, but he needed it. So with this he had it. I rose, releasing Arcanine, who was practically buzzing. Jumping onto her back, I didn't have to say a word. We were in sync for this. She was off, running across the city and then into a familiar mansion. I stopped outside and walked up to the entrance, and just as I was about to knock, I tilted backwards as something blurred past where my head had been. That's really rude. Had to see if your training has held. Janine offered, smirking at me. You're late. I had a Pokemon emergency. Well, you had better hurry then. I nodded and stepped inside, leaping instantly over the tripwire, then rolling forward, only stopping to resecure my hat. I moved on, rolling my eyes at the 2 ninja that had ambushed me upon entering. Tripwires and invisible glass, I would smash my nose into his old hat. I was totally prepared for this. Shoot, that's the floor gone. I cursed as the trapdoor activated below me, making the floor literally disappear from 1 second to the next. That was a new one. That hadn't been there before. That's cheating. I screamed up as I fell down the slide. That's training. Janine's voice echoed from above. That's training. I mocked to myself as I kept sliding down until I fell into the pit, the basement of the compound. As I rolled, hitting the bottom, I looked around ready to jump, but realized I wasn't going to be attacked. Normally there would be a ninja down here to battle any trainer that fell inside. I waited a moment and then Janine came sliding down behind me. That was mean. I told her, and I could see her grin behind her mask. You allowed yourself to relax, and believe you were safe. Yeah. Never safe. Always be vigilant. I grumbled at the ninja girl. A moment later, one of Janine's pokeballs popped open, and I opened my arms to the leaping Venonat. Hey Venonat! I greeted, happily spinning the bug around for a bit. How are you? Has Janine been feeding you okay? Venonat. It cheered up at me happily and nuzzled into my hug. Of course I have. Janine said, outraged, and I laughed at her. Knowing she was being honest. Janine was a good trainer after all. I'm just teasing. Humph. Well, I see my Venonat still likes you. Yeah, we were good partners during training. Weren't we? Venonat. Well, you should hurry, father is still waiting for you. Janine reminded me with an impish glint in her eye. And whose fault is it that I'm later than I was? I asked her. Venonat jumping from my arms and cheerily heading out of the room, happy to lead Janine and I out. I don't know what you mean. Who would fall for such an obvious pitfall? She mocked, and I scoffed. Obvious my ass, never mind. I grumbled. At least I got to see Venonat again. You are late. I had a Pokemon emergency. I answered back and then bowed. Koga. Victoria. He greeted me in turn and waved me to sit. I settled onto the cushion and looked out over the courtyard we had once battled. It looked better, but there were still spots where my Lodex tunnels had damaged the grass, or other damage remained. Everything has been settled. Here. He handed me a small booklet, and I took it, checking it over and smiling at my own face looking back at me. Thank you, Koga. I know this was probably not easy. The opposite. I reached out to the champion Lance, and he was quite amused. He ensured it was approved. Koga looked to me, then with his face as blank as always. Are you sure? You can still stop now, but once you begin. Never step back. Never stop moving forward. I decided to answer him after a moment, snapping the little booklet shut. This whole situation stinks, and the adults made it this way. So I'm going to cause enough of a shock that will throw everything into question. Audacious. It's the only choice I have. I answered back firmly. I have to make a statement. I won't be the first to win a conference in their first year. Others have done it. But this? I slapped the booklet. I looked, you know. No one has ever done this. Your time is not long. Time? Koga, I plan on finishing this basically without stopping. It's about making a statement, remember? I rose up and he nodded, not agreeing with what I was doing, or denying me. You may fumble. Then I take a rest and hit them again. I shrugged. Doing it in one sweep would help, but no one can deny that just doing it is something else entirely. Good. Don't allow your expectations to cloud your judgment. I considered saying something smart, but instead I just bowed as I rose. Thank you for your advice, Koga-sensei. He nodded, not saying anything else, as I threw out my second ride for this trip. Dragonite nodded to me, already filled in on the plan, but before I jumped on I stopped. Have you made friends with a Golbat enough to evolve one into a Crobat? I asked, and Koga sipped at his tea for a moment. I have not. I stared at Koga for a moment, wondering what I could say, and instead I decided to just be blunt. Take a walk with your Pokemon with him on your shoulder. Or your arm, depending on his preference. Golbat likes to hang, right? Take him back to where you first met him. Tell him that you wish to deepen your bond, that you want to be his friend and grow stronger together. And find out his favorite food. Pokemon love that sort of thing. I told the old ninja. You believe that will work? It can work. There will be struggles and dissatisfaction on both sides, but that's how all friendships are. It takes time to build that bond, but when it firms, amazing things can happen. He was staring back at me now. Our eyes meeting fully. I will consider it. Tell Janine then. She has a Golbat too, right? I bet she'll do it before you do. I said cheekily, and winked at the girl who had been listening the whole time. Hanging out in the rafters on the porch not far from us. All right, I'm off. See ya. I cheered and jumped onto Dragonite's back, and we disappeared into the blue sky. It didn't take us long to reach our destination. Once again, showing just how fast Dragonite was in the air. Even with the mountain in the way. Finding the right city wasn't too hard either. There were plenty of markings to follow if you had a ninja tell you what to look for. We landed right in the middle of the city, and I noted the difference between what a Dragonite landing would normally mean in Kanto, to what it was like in Johto. Instead of gasps of shock and hands reaching for pokeballs before stopping, we got surprised looks, and then smiles. I smiled back and waved, no need to be rude after all. This was Violet City, Johto. I looked past Dragonite, who turned to look at what I was focused on, and I could see her wings twitch in excitement. A gym battle. We had done more training, but the fact was, the one thing my team needed was experience. Just as I had explained to Riolu, strengthening my team too fast had stunted them in their experience. So if I couldn't go to the normal battle courts and enjoy some training, I'd go to the Masters. Koga had settled everything. Registering my acceptance in the Johto gym circuit, and confirming I had a passport for Johto in case of any trouble. I also knew he hadn't actually warned the poor bastards. Dragonite turned to look at me, and I could see the eagerness in her eyes. She wasn't a full battle maniac like Arcanine, but she liked growing stronger too. I nodded, and returned her, heading inside. The doors opened, leading to a very open lobby. The glass building that was like a giant aviary had an open interior. I could look up and see into the rest of the space. The chirp of birds could be heard as well. Hello. Welcome to the Violet City Gym. The secretary greeted me with a pleasant smile as I stalked in. I was ready. My team were ready. Time to sweep Johto. Hi. I'm Victoria Ferris of Viridian City. I'm here to challenge Faulkner to a battle. Please tell him. And then I grinned, a smile full of teeth spreading across my face. Let me fight your strongest team. Faulkner. He stepped out into the gym. A late battle request, far later than normal. His gym circuit rush ended months ago. He was culturally the first gym that should be attempted in Johto. Of course, not all the trainers followed the course, and so he was still capable of handling everything up to 7 badge matches normally. Only Blackthorn handed out the 8th badge after all. But that didn't mean Faulkner had never done matches at that level. Trainers looking to test themselves, conference matches himself, tournaments he had taken part in. There were many reasons why he would draw on his strongest friends. A challenge from a Kanto trainer? That was unusual. Especially one that was taking the badge challenge. One that had no Johton badges? Not unknown. It had happened before. The conflict between regions had caused plenty of arrogant trainers crossing over both sides over the years. Although Faulkner had only heard his father mention it before. He had only been gym leader for a few years after all. It could be why this Kanto trainer had chosen him first. Doubtful they had any respect for the Johton order. Then again, Bugsy was even newer in his position. But he had been challenged, the girl was legally allowed to be here, Maka had checked, and so Faulkner would battle. The wind of his arena was already blowing his kimono, letting him feel the air currents of the open-topped battle area. The girl was already in position. Interesting outfit. A farmer girl from Kanto it seems, but if he mocked her, it would only be to his own embarrassment. And Whitney would kill him if she ever found out. I am Faulkner. Violet City Gym Leader. Master of Flying-type Pokemon. You seek my Zephyr badge? I do. Please. Battle me with everything you have. Hold nothing back. The girl shouted out eagerly. She was young. Maka had checked, this was her first year, she hadn't even had a first conference yet. She believed she was capable of taking him at his full strength. Then he would dissuade her of this arrogance. She asked for everything. So he would give it. To show her how high the winds carried to the very top, Maka called out the rules for the battle. And Faulkner as gym leader began. Pidgeot. Go. Faulkner felt confident as the girl looked up at his Pidgeot, as one of his strongest Pokemon took to the air. Pidgeot for all their power were fairly common, many early trainers would capture a Pidgey, but a well-trained Pidgeot was something altogether different. Lucario. She called out, releasing. Faulkner frowned, he had never seen a Pokemon like that before. Fighting type? It looked like it, that would be a disadvantage if true. The girl and Pokemon shared a glance and a nod together. Aerial Ace. He cried out the moment the battle was on. Aura Sphere. Keep it between you and the Pidgeot. She called out, but it was far too slow, his call had finished by the time Pidgeot had already begun. His Pokemon knew how to start a match after all. Pidgeot, glowing with energy, slammed into the Pokemon, sending it rolling along the floor in a tumble. That was odd. As the Pokemon came out of its tumble, the girl didn't offer any orders, instead the glowing attack in the Lucario's hands blasted forth. Dodge. He called, and Pidgeot swooped, without even focusing on the attack, trusting his word, his wings tucked in, he dropped and then soared back. But the glowing orb didn't relent at all. It was relentless. Protect. He called instead, and Pidgeot turned, the Aura Sphere had chased him down, but a moment later it amounted to nothing. The white shield appeared and the orb exploded atop it with some power. Faulkner narrowed his eyes, that was a dangerous move. A homing move like that would be trouble to deal with. Lucario. Don't let up. Again. She called before the explosion had even finished. The blue dog-like Pokemon crouched down and gathered another orb of power. It grew faster this time. Not having to deal with just being hit, the Lucario seemed more focused. Faulkner saw all of this, and gave an order. Swoop in. He called, an order that Pidgeot would no means brave bird. He watched as Pidgeot dropped, energy already gathering on him once more before his wings opened, for half a moment redirecting his angle straight towards the Lucario. The Aura Sphere had been launched as he spoke, and it had missed despite it continuing to track after the bird, but Pidgeot was now on the attack. The trainer looked like she was following, just as she was about to order something. Lucario roared, and a protect formed around her. Faulkner realized then that this girl's Pokémon wasn't in sync with her. There wasn't a reliable breath of wind between them. It was discordant and fighting. This girl thought she was going to come challenge him for his Zephyr badge? He would teach her that the level of Johto gym leaders wasn't any lower than Kanto. Pidgeot struck the shield, the energy surrounding him vanishing as the energy simply couldn't finish. It was a good thing in Faulkner's mind. No hit, no recoil. Unfortunately, it did stop Pidgeot long enough for the Aura Sphere to strike him. He cried out at the hit, but a moment later, his powerful wings burst forth, pushing all the smoke away in a moment. Good, Faulkner didn't want this challenger to believe she had him for even a moment. Quick attack! She called out, obviously hoping to hit Pidgeot while he was close to the ground. Attack! Faulkner called in turn. The exact same white energy surrounded Pidgeot. Both Pokémon used quick attack. It was a mistake on this girl's part to think that Pidgeot would retreat. Both Pokémon rushed the other, and Faulkner couldn't help but smirk. The Lucario was slower, not by a lot, which was impressive and spoke of good training, but Pidgeot were legendary for their speed. Pidgeot smashed into Lucario first, its wing nearly doubling her over, but she was tenacious. The Lucario fought back, swinging a blow into Pidgeot's back that caused Faulkner's bird to cry out. They both spun off, Pidgeot taking to the air this time actually retreating, while Lucario fell to one knee. Lucario! She called out, looking worried. Then the Lucario glanced back and nodded. And the worry melted confidence replaced it. Where the confidence came from Faulkner didn't know, but if she wasn't returning it was still an active battle. Tailwind! Faulkner ordered and Pidgeot spun before flapping once, and suddenly a wind started up, blowing over the building behind him across the arena and into the girl's face. It was Faulkner's favorite method of reminding challengers the power of wind. But the girl was unbothered. Reaching up and grabbing the goggles on her head over her eyes. She seemed completely unbothered by the move that Faulkner had often gotten raged at for making. He could respect that. He refocused on the battle. The Lucario had already started creating another Aura Sphere without the girl saying a word. Was the Pokémon one of her parents? Was she using it to try and gain the badge? But then why come to Johto? None of this made sense. Pidgeot, finish this. Faulkner called. The Lucario couldn't take many more hits. Whatever the girl planned, he would find out, and overcome it through skill. Pidgeot began glowing again as he dove into an aerial ace. To Faulkner's surprise, there was no hesitation in the girl. The moment he called the attack, she started speaking as well. Lucario! Fire the Aura Sphere to your left, and run to your right. Now! Faulkner frowned at her words. What was she planning? The Aura Sphere shot off, and Lucario started running. Again, the Pokémon's good fitness impressed Faulkner. He had never seen these Pokémon before, but they were strong. He noticed the Aura Sphere slowing and then turning back around, but scoffed. It wouldn't reach in time. Pidgeot would strike first. Lucario nearly made it to the outer edge of the arena. Pidgeot flat with the floor, the wind shrieking at his passing. Then the girl gave her next order. Now! Quick attack back. What? He asked aloud, wondering what she was thinking. But then he understood. Lucario glowed white and blitzed back the way she had come, slamming right into Pidgeot. The Lucario came out the loser, smashing backwards into the arena wall. Even as Pidgeot flinched from the strike, quick attack had landed first, and Pidgeot was regaining control when it happened. The Aura Sphere, that had already started shooting back towards Pidgeot as Lucario stalled her out, struck. Pidgeot! Faulkner called out in shock, the dust cloud of the explosion, keeping him from knowing. Lucario! Return! The girl called out, surprising Faulkner as his eyes had been on the dust cloud surrounding his own Pokémon. The girl hadn't hesitated. Simply pulling her Pokémon off the field now that it couldn't battle anymore. Then the dust was blown away. Pidgeot cried out, ruffled and battered, not in great shape, but still there. Good job, Lucario, we both still have a lot to learn, but I think we might just be okay. The girl said, speaking to her Pokeball with a smile. What was her name again, Victoria? He supposed if she was kind enough with her Pokemon, he would remember her name. Cantonian or not. Now you know the power of bird Pokemon. Pidgeot. Show them the power of the wind beneath your wings. Faulkner called out at the first round victory. He smiled, that was a good line. A bit different than his usual. He would have to remember them, maybe practice them a bit, polish them up and use them in future gym battles. Victoria just looked confused, then simply shrugged her tiny shoulders, and threw out a second Pokeball. What? Faulkner asked, his voice carried by the wind rushing past him, because that wasn't right. That was an Arcanine. A woo. The massive canine held fire bursting from her, and the tailwind shifted, the entire flow of the arena altered at the heat coming off the legendary Pokemon. What? Faulkner hesitated too long, and Maka coughed into her fist. He nodded to her, signaling the battle begin. Pidgeot. Use dash. Go. Victoria called out, almost sounding like she was cheering, and then Pidgeot was down. Smashed into the earth, in the blink of an eye. Arcanine's mouth wrapped around its throat. Then it looked up, tail wagging happily as if just waiting to attack again. Pidgeot. Return. Faulkner looked at that thing and had to wonder. What the hell was going on? A note from Sarah's. Thank you all for reading. Chapter 68. A note from Sarah's. Hee hee. Might seem a little silly to post another story when I just went on a hiatus, but I, just sort of tinkered with PTV and had a chapter. Oops. I think Faulkner wasn't taking his loss well. I met his glare with a soft smile, just waiting for the official stuff to end. His fist was gripped tight as he held his badge. He didn't speak. So I decided I would be the bigger person. You fought really well. I wasn't expecting that tri-attack combo. I offered. You ground out, but didn't say anything more as he seemed to be mastering himself. You have a powerful, well-trained Pokemon. Yeah, Arcanine is a good girl. I confirmed, patting at her Pokeball. I felt kind of bad, but Faulkner just didn't have any Pokemon capable of keeping up with Arcanine. She had blitzed through the entire rest of his team, her speed overwhelming the birds she was facing. Even when they surged into the sky, it only meant Arcanine had some time to power up, and after that? Well, a powered-up Arcanine wasn't really stoppable without something to counter it. Not something Faulkner had, so he got swept. Overwhelming force met type-focused skill, and plowed through it. You have earned the Star Zephyr badge through your actions today. But if you think this means anything, he said, offering the badge, and definitely not doing the usual gym leader stuff. I accepted the badge gently, treating it with respect as I slipped it into my badge case. It just means I overcame a strong challenge. I replied back after, looking the older teen in his eyes. I don't give a damn about Johto-Kanto relations. Politics is stupid, and I won't live my life afraid of it. I'm here to get extra experience before my first conference, because I'm going to win, and then? Then I'm going to fight Lance and prove my Dragonite is strong. I pushed my badge case into its spot and gave the boy a final nod. Then I walked away. I had known politics would be brought up, and that some of the gym leaders would see this as a political thing. It sort of was, but it had nothing to do with Johto-Kanto relations. I just wanted to beat all of Lance's achievements, so no one would call my Pokemon weak again. I didn't really care about winning most of the time, but my Pokemon had their pride, and it was my job to train them into the best they could be. So I wouldn't let Lance's words be remembered, I would wipe them all away with victory. Plus, I liked the badges. I left Faulkner's gym, leaving the confused teenager in my wake as I headed to the Pokemon Center. Nurse Joyce didn't care about what region you came from, so the pink-haired nurse behind the counter greeted me happily and took Arcanine and Lucario for some healing. Lucario had done well, but I hoped her loss didn't beat her down. She still had at least a month or so of gravity training before she was hitting the point where it started really showing. Although she was stronger already, I stretched as I settled into a seat at the Poke Center and just watched the news for a while. Nothing really interesting was happening, although there was mentions of the conference coming up and how tickets were out and traffic would increase on the way and blah blah blah. And here they are. Your Lucario is fully recovered, and your Arcanine, oh my. She was so fluffy. Your cousins always say the same thing. I told her as I took back the pokeballs with a smile, and Nurse Joy laughed in delight at my reveal. Alright. Time to continue on. Bugsy next. I threw out Dragonite to give Arcanine a rest and hopped on. Azalea Town wasn't too far, just deeper into the forests of Johto. Thankfully, it was a straight shot south over Route 32. Dragonite flapped her wings and we were off, to the stares of interest from the Violet Town residents. None of them would know that I was a Kanto girl and not a member of the Blackthorn. So other than interested looks, no one stopped me. Dragonite raced through the air, easily carrying me over what would have been a long walk high above. I sat up a bit, the wind hitting my face as I held one hand on my hat to keep it on to just let the wind flow over my face. I missed traveling. It was funny how eager I had been for home and a real bed, but now I was already feeling nostalgic for camping and traveling. Or maybe I just loved flying. Magic Dragon rides were pretty much the best thing ever. We followed the route into Azalea Town without any issues, slowly coming in for a landing in town. I looked around and noticed once again a few interested looks, but no real shock or surprise. It was kind of funny how calm people reacted to Dragonite here in Johto. I found the gym without any trouble and Dragonite returned to her ball as I entered inside, only to find the whole place deserted. Hello? Is anyone here? Huh? Oh, a challenger? A voice called out from behind the desk and I blinked as an old man sat up from a chair he had completely reclined, blinking from behind his massive Coke bottle glasses before seeing me. Hello. I greeted the old man who sort of stared at me for a while before his eyes widened. Right, a challenger indeed. You are here to challenge our Bugsy? Yep. I agreed instantly. The old man had broken into a big grin as he asked, making the whole situation pleasant. More pleasant than Faulkner's gym for sure. Well, I'm sorry to say, but Bugsy isn't in. He's off in the forest, catching bugs. The old man exclaimed and then cackled at my expression. Huh. Anytime he'll be back? Oh, not likely until late. All the kids looking to challenge him have come through already by now. You might be the last challenge he gets this year. I nodded at that, and instantly decided to track him down. I'll have to find him then. I said, maybe I could still get the match done today. Any particular area he goes to? Oh no, the whole forest is his playground. If you are going to hunt him down. Well, good luck. The old man offered, cackling, and I sighed. This was going to be a thing, wasn't it? I rushed back out the door, and released Arcanine. Time to track down a bug trainer. Bugsy. It was nice to finally get away from the months of constant battles. Sure, it was good experience for his team. Bugs grew fast after all. A Pokemon freshly caught might be his new ace in a single season. It was fun. Bugs were always happy to grow stronger. The problem was that even at their best, they weren't always up to the same level as other Pokemon. Bugsy was proud of his specialization. Happy to be the gym leader of Azalea. Everyone always supported him, but it was frustrating not to be the best. The one time he had fought against Claire had been eye-opening. His strongest Scyther simply couldn't stand up against her dragon types. It had been frustrating then, but instead of trying to move away from bug type like so many trainers did, he decided instead to master them. Just like the bugs he trained, he would grow strong fast as well. It was why he was out in the forest again. He needed to capture new Pokemon for his low-level challenges. Too many of his friends had evolved over the season. It was always funny when a trainer came in for their first badge and had a Spinarak evolve mid-match, becoming too much for the new trainer. Bugsy was pretty famous for how many evolutions happened in his battles after all. He hummed a little, a noise that the bugs of the forest didn't mind. They made vibrations like that themselves, and often he had discovered humming soothed them more than anything. He was trying to track down a Scyther that had moved into the forest. It was aggressive, trying to fill out a territory by pushing out other Scyther that Bugsy had bred and released. He would need to capture it and get it to understand that it could coexist as part of his territory. Of course, other than the injured bugs in the meantime, this was all positive for him. Bugsy loved having more Scythers around. They were very cute, with how often they tried to be fierce. He was still tracking it down when he heard it. The sound of a battle. He started racing. Oh no, Many of the Pokemon in the forest were his. This section all belonged to Azalea Town as a sanctuary. It was clearly marked. Were some kids poaching again? He started rushing towards the noise, and he could smell fire. Oh no! He leapt over a stream, making it to the other side with an off and dropped off his bug net. He would have to pick it up later. He had to rush. He burst out of a bush, just in time to see. The scyther he had been hunting was on the ground. Knocked out by. Was that an Arcanine? He had only seen them on murals before. Then the girl with the big bright hat that was standing nearby reached for her belt, for a pokeball. No. This area was a reserve. No capturing was allowed. Hey, stop it! He shouted, but it was too late and a pokeball was thrown. He was hoping the ball wouldn't be a capture. The Rangers were angry enough when this happened, but the Johto Pokemon League would likely get this girl in so much trouble for catching a Pokemon here. But to his shock, the Pokeball opened and a Chansey popped out. Chance! She cheered even as both the Arcanine and the girl's eyes were locked onto him. The pink Pokemon walked over and started healing the Scyther. That's Bugsy. Get him! She shouted loudly, and Bugsy jumped a bit, startling at the sudden aggression. Why? He screamed as before he could react, there was a massive Arcanine leaping right at him. A few seconds of motion without connection led to Bugsy pretty sure he was on his back with his mouth full of fluff. A few seconds later, the fluff was shifted and he realized he had an Arcanine laying on top of him staring down into his face. Oh no! Was the girl evil? A member of some poacher group? He opened his mouth to try and say something when suddenly Arcanine leaned down and a long tongue ran straight up his face. Oh, it was in his mouth. She didn't stop. Continuing to lick. Was this a lickitung? Stop! He shouted, but it didn't stop. The attack continued, and he was starting to get dizzy, before suddenly it did stop. He blinked saliva out of his eyes, and saw the girl had her Arcanine's muzzle in her hands, holding her mouth closed. I said get him. That's on me. She said, sounding a little annoyed. But you know better. Then the blonde turned to Bugsy with an apologetic smile. Sorry about Arcanine. Well, she means well. Come on, Arcanine, get off. You caught him. Good girl. A few moments later, he was free and wiping his face with what he could to get his face dry. What is going on? He demanded, and the girl just laughed. He looked up to see her rubbing at the back of her head. Well, I'm here to challenge your gym, and the nice old man at the counter said you were in the forest, so I went hunting for you, but we couldn't find you, and then a cool Scyther showed up demanding a battle, so Arcanine battled him, and then you showed up. So everything worked out. He looked up at her for a moment. Scyther are cool, yeah. Yeah. She agreed happily. Okay, fine. She couldn't be that bad of a person if she thought Scyther were cool. You're from Kanto? He repeated in shock, and I just nodded happily. He had been staring at Arcanine after getting off her, and mentioning he hadn't heard of any trainers with one, when I told him I was from Viridian City. I'm here in Johto, to get all the badges here before the league conference. I want to give my Pokemon lots of experience against stronger trainers. And I want to mess with Lance. He's actually kinda nice? But I want to beat him. Bugsy blinked at me for a moment before sort of shaking his head. I don't think that's really going to happen. Lance is amazing. He's a dragon-type nerd. But I like dragon types too. So I get it. I offered with a happy smile. I mean, Bugsy was a bug-type nerd, so he was similar. Champion Lance isn't a nerd. I've met him. He's a total nerd. I mean, I am too. I'm a Pokemon nerd, but Lance is definitely a dragon nerd. I offered, and Bugsy seemed to be getting a little heated at my words. The champion isn't a nerd. Stop insulting him. I'm not though? Nerds are just people that are obsessed with their thing to the point they will take social negatives to be able to keep doing it. Like Lance and his love of dragon types. The cape is cool, but I bet he got all sorts of remarks about it until he became so strong no one would insult him. That probably happened. Bugsy admitted. See? And you're a bug-type nerd. Which is cool. I don't mean anything mean about it. You love bug types and are totally obsessed. It's cool. You definitely have a lot of love. I explained, and my words at least seemed to keep him from getting angry as the purple-haired boy rubbed at his hair, wincing a bit as some saliva got on his hands. No one has ever called me a nerd as something other than an insult before. He finally decided on, and I shrugged. The best way to get rid of the sting of an insult is to take it over. It still has some negative connotations. But if I was trying to capture a bug-type Pokemon, and I was having trouble, I'd go to the bug-type nerd. You know? Sure. He offered after a moment of seeming uncomfortable thought. Anyways, I wasn't planning on going back to the gym tonight. Come on, don't you want a fun battle? I want to challenge your strongest team to try for the star badge. Won't that be fun? Sorry, I have to take care of. He looked over at the Scyther that was currently being babied by Chansey. The poor bug had woken up after facing Arcanine and seemed to want to try its luck against the healer, only for Chansey to dissuade him of that. He was now laying on his stomach doing everything he could not to meet Chansey's eyes. Scyther took that as a threat display, I think. Either way, he was thoroughly cowed. The Scyther? He's a stray to the area. Came in a week ago and was trying to carve out some territory. I needed to capture him and settle him in so he doesn't cause any more harm. You can't capture him. This land is a reserve. Sorry. I blinked at the sudden shift and looked around to see if he was talking to someone else, but no one was there. I wasn't planning on capturing him though. I mean, Scyther are cool, and I would love a Scizor. But I already have lots of Pokemon. I really don't need any more right now. Oh. I laughed at the sort of confused look on the boy's face. You have to deal with people trying to capture Pokemon here a lot. All the time. Although the league and rangers will fix it, the trainer always gets in trouble, and I try to avoid that. He explained, looking a little bashful. New trainers tend to be quick to catch Pokemon without really thinking. I'd hate for them to end up with a mark on their license so soon. You're a nice guy, aren't you, Bugsy? I asked, and then I laughed at the blush on his face. Anyway, I guess if the Scyther is already here, I can take care of settling him and give you a match after. Sure. Want some help? I asked more than anything. I was just curious how a bug trainer would handle integrating a new Pokemon into already filled land. Seriously, the entire forest was full of bug Pokemon. Arcanine had ended up needing to go slow, just to not step on anyone. Oh. I guess? Are you okay with bugs? He asked, and I smiled happily. As if bugs bothered me. Ha ha ha, so ticklish. I laughed in delight as an army of caterpie crawled all over me. Their sticky suction cup legs tickled as they explored every inch of me, trying to get more of the berries I had offered them, while settling in the Scyther that was mostly introducing him to other alpha? Leader Pokemon? They weren't quite alpha Pokemon as I thought of them, but leader Pokemon worked best. The ones that the other listened to. We came across all sorts of fun spots. Like the Metapod forest. Hundreds of Metapods hanging down from trees from string shot, giving everything the feel of a weeping willow. The caterpie were everywhere in this area too. And I had made the correct decision to offer them some berries. Huh. Bugsy muttered as I did my best to pull exploring caterpie from inside my shirt, or from under my hat. Offering them a bit of berry when I caught them. What? I asked when I finally caught my breath from giggling when I got most of the horde off myself. Most girls freak out when bugs are on them. It's a caterpie. Pokemon are wonderful, why would I freak out? I asked honestly, as I looked up as the brim of my hat was folded entirely over my face. I could feel a caterpie crawling along the brim even if my hat couldn't really hold him up. I wrangled him as well, and just put him on my shoulder, and gave him a little piece that he happily cried out for and started munching away. Caterpie are the cutest. Oh. Don't freak out. Bugsy called out, and I blinked at the sudden worry. Then a moment later, I felt it. Something land on my hat. Oh? A new friend, huh? Hungry? I offered to the wait, and held up a berry. Then a moment later, a form I hadn't seen yet leaned out over my hat, and I saw why Bugsy was so concerned. A spinnerack was a bit more than a cater pie after all. Oh. I gasped as I watched the spider take the bit of berry from my hands, munching it down happily. Once it was fully gone, I reached up and pulled my hat off, supporting it so I could bring it down to eye level. I saw Bugsy looking like he was going to rush in any moment, but I ignored him, and instead settled down cross-legged in the grass with my hat on my lap. I've never seen a spinnerack in person before. They don't really show up in Kanto much. I explained to Bugsy. Hello, spinnerack. I'm Vicky, did you like the berry? I asked, and watched as the six-legged spider spun around to stare at me with its cute little eyes. Then it opened its mouth, its fangs opening and closing a whole bunch. Yep, you liked it. For a cutie like you, I can give another piece, okay? I said, winking at it as I pulled another berry chunk out of my bag and watched happily as he devoured it. Little guy must have been starving. I've never seen a girl not scream when a spinnerack lands on them. They are poisonous, you know? Venomous technically. I agreed with a laugh. But you only have to worry about that if the Pokemon intends on hurting you. This guy was just hungry. Girl actually. Bugsy commented and I perked up happily. Really? How can you tell? Oh, it just has a different spinneret? He offered, pointing at its rear end. I guess I can't tell, since I've never seen one before. I offered with a shrug. Suddenly I remembered that I wasn't actually here to play with cute Pokemon. Oh. Right. The battle. I got distracted. I get distracted with bug Pokemon too. He offered with a smile that had me returning it. Bugsy was pretty cool. Bugsy was not very cool. I had decided to use Milotic for this battle, to give Arcanine a rest. Also, because if I didn't, Arcanine would want every battle. And Milotic had just been too much. Bugsy had been a super impressive battler for what he had. He came up with a lot of interesting strategies, even using a Scyther's sword dance to block attacks. It just hadn't been enough to really match the overwhelming power of Big Eel. You, okay? I'm fine. He said as he was struggling to wipe his eyes. I'm not hurt. Well, not physically. I whispered and settled down next to him. I had challenged Bugsy's strongest team, and while it had been impressive, it hadn't really been awe-inspiring. I'd put him around the same level as Brock. He was good, had some interesting strategies, but just didn't have the power to recapture a sweep once it started. You want Chansey to look over your friends? I asked, and he looked up, his face red and puffy, and nodded. Milotic hadn't swept his whole team like Arcanine basically had Faulkner, but it was close, and I only pulled Milotic back to give Lucario another shot. She had done great against his Ariados, battering through to earn her victory in a much more impressive showing than against Faulkner, despite so little time having passed. Lucario just needed experience with her increased strength, and experience battling trainers. She already had the battle instincts from the wild. I settled in beside him on the grassy Azalea gym floor as all of his Pokemon were released, and Chansey looked them over, seemingly quite happy to help out. You fought really well. You beat me completely. So? I only have my main team, and a second group of younger Pokemon I'm training right now. You have like a dozen different groups? That was still my strongest team, and they couldn't beat a single one of your Pokemon. Milotic is a wall that's hard to beat. And he gets tougher if you give him a status effect. When you poisoned him, it only made his defense stronger. I explained, and Bugsy slumped. I didn't know that. Not many people do. Milotic are super rare. I'm one of the biggest Milotic specialists in the world. I said proudly. I wasn't sure if that was true, but that was a title I would wear with pride. I know bug types, but other Pokemon, I don't know them. It's why I'm a good gym trainer, but not a good battler. I always use the wrong tactics. He offered, and I frowned at his slumped head. That's not true. Scyther using sword dance to cut through my attacks was amazing. But he didn't do anything against your Milotic. That's because Scyther is a stronger attacker, but Milotic is a strong defender. It was just a difficult matchup since Milotic was already poisoned and so his defenses were really strong. Bugsy just shook his head, not saying anything else. Then slowly, after a bit, he reached into his pocket. Here. It's like the third star badge I've given out this year. None of the other gym leaders have given out that many. He whispered tiredly, and I frowned. So? Who cares what they do? I'm supposed to be the gym leader here, but I'm weak. He mumbled, looking up. You're from Kanto. I'm supposed to be able to defend against any Cantonian trainer if there is an attack, or if there is a war. But I can't. You beat me so easily. I have all of the Kanto Gym star badges. I said suddenly, and Bugsy twitched as he looked up right into my eyes. I also hit Faulkner this morning and earned his. I'm planning on hitting every major gym and taking a star badge before the conference. Impossible. If Price doesn't stop you. Claire will. Maybe. But I'm going to try anyway. I told you, remember? I plan on fighting Lance. I can't be afraid of something like this. Then I got more serious. So don't compare normal Kanto trainers to me. You fought well, Bugsy, and I'll be honest. I would hate to come to Azalea Town if I was planning on trouble. Look around. You have hundreds of Pokemon around here that would fight for you. More even. I said, waving around. The battle had been intense, but there was a marked section of his gym that was meant for battles. The rest of it was full of bug types. Hanging from every branch, from every surface. This place would be a nightmare to assault, unless you were just trying to burn the whole thing down. I winced at my own thought. Best not to think about that again. How'd you get so strong? He asked, and I blinked, then I leaned back. I got lucky. I answered truthfully. I found Pokemon that would be my friends, and trained them as best as I could. I focused on them. When I got my 8th badge in Viridian City, I only had 6 Pokemon, but only 5 of them were battlers. I offered truthfully. I did a lot to learn about diet, and how to prepare food for them to make sure they could grow strong, and I got lucky finding my friends that could grow so strong. It was the truth. Luck played a major part in it. If I had never run into Feebas, what would my first Pokemon be? Growlithe? Would Papa have brought her home if I hadn't already earned an early trainer license? Chansey wouldn't have happened. Would I have ventured out and tried to catch a Magikarp? Okay, yeah, I likely would have tried to capture a Magikarp. I laughed at the image of me with a Magikarp trying to beat Brock. Man, that would have been funny. I want to be strong too. He whispered, reminding me I was sitting next to Bugsy, who wasn't happy currently. Well, you have a lot of strong Pokemon. Do you go out and battle people anymore? I asked, and he shook his head. Not really? I'm so busy with the gym I don't have time. Then maybe you need to broaden your experience. You should go out into the world and find some trainers to battle. I can't. The gym is my responsibility. I can't be gone for long. Then don't go out for long? Do you have a Pokemon you can ride? I asked, and he shook his head. Right, there weren't a lot of big bug types in this area. No wait, only like 2 could even learn fly. Ugh. Pokemon game rules were so weird sometimes. A note from Sarah's. https://www.royalroadcdn.com/public/covers -large/pokemon-adventure-with -big-ears-and.jpg?marktime=sign 1712144118. Hey. Hey you. Did our eyes just meet? That means we have to battle. Ah, you don't want to battle? You just want to see cute Pokemon? Okay, that I can understand. Here. Take this. It's a secret that'll help you later. Huh? Yeah, it's called Pokebun. It's super cute. It's written by my friend Ravensdagger. I actually sort of caused it? Anyway, you should read it. It helps if you read their other story, Cinnamon Bun, as well, but you can just read this if you are just looking for cute Pokemon things. Also, it updates like crazy. Ravensdagger scares me a little. Chapter 69. A note from Sarah's. For everyone following my stories. The hiatus I started for Gitsy is likely to extend just another week or so. Thank you for being patient. Since it was already getting dark, I decided to stay in Azalea Town's Pokemon Center. Sure, I could go home, riding Dragonite, or Arcanine, but I would just have to come back in the morning, and I already had everything set up for me to be gone for a short trip. So I got a Pokemon Center room, which was thankfully easy as Azalea Town was in a slow period now that the league was coming to a close soon. Is everyone comfy? I asked. I looked around the room. Chansey was using the chair in the room. It was a fold-out, and she looked quite content with a blanket over her and her little feet up. Arcanine was comfortable everywhere, but I had given her a pillow to drool into, and she was happy. Dragonite and Milotic were both curled up in the bed, and Milotic was already snoozing as Dragonite opened her eyes at my call and smiled sleepily. Gyarados was happier sleeping in his ball, but I'd get up early, and we would have some time during breakfast to let him stretch. I always felt a little bad that he was too big for most rooms. Lucario, to my amusement, was laying on top of Arcanine, seemingly quite comfortable in her fur. Unfortunately, I had done that before, and Arcanine had a tendency to move in her sleep. She'd likely get thrown around in the middle of the night. But everyone looked ready. I flipped the lights and made my way over to my bed in the dark where I curled up. As I settled in, Milotic's fin flowed over me, and I turned to see his eye was open a bit. I smiled and cuddled in. That's my boy. I cheered as Gyarados happily dropped the beach ball onto the dirt at my feet. He was getting some morning exercise playing in a stream that ran through the town. While I was throwing a beach ball into the stream and he was fetching it. Excuse me. A voice called out and I looked over to see Bugsy of all people looking nervous as he approached. Hey Bugsy. I greeted him as Gyarados returned the beach ball again. I grabbed it from him and gave him a big smile before leaning back and chucking it as far as I could, and he twisted and chased after it. That's a Gyarados. Yep. Isn't he cute? I asked as he returned and dropped the ball, but I reached up and squeezed his big old cheeks, getting a gurgle in turn, which wasn't a laugh, but was close to a pleased noise. Alright. He seemed to firm himself up. You're planning on traveling to the other Johto gyms, right? Yep. Please let me come with you. You're right. I think I need to get away from the gym for a bit, see Johto again, and watch high-end battles. Please take me with you. He asked, bending over in a deep bow, and I blinked. Huh. I didn't really expect to run into a Brock development. Sure. More the merrier. I offered back, laughing at the boy's completely bent over bow stiffening up as he realized how quickly I agreed. Oh really? Sure. Come on, I'm about to finish breakfast for my team before we head out, why don't you join me? I offered, waving to the little camping area I had set up to cook in. I was playing with Gyarados as the water in the pot heated up. Oh. Sure. Wow. Bugsy whispered behind me. I turned to send him a smirk as Dragonite's wings beat once more and we were rocketing forward again. I guess any Johto boy would have some fascination with Dragonite, and it was probably pretty rare they got to ride on one's back. Yeah. It's great, right? I asked, and he nodded. His short fluffy hair flowing straight backwards was pretty funny looking. I decided to be mature and not tease him about it though. We traveled northwest, right out of Azalea Town, and with only once confirming from Bugsy, we soon saw Goldenrod City. Sticking out of seemingly the side of a forest on the beaches was a big radio tower as well. Thankfully it made it easy to spot. With a few moments circling the city, we spotted a Pokemon Center and easily touched down. Bugsy jumped off first, his legs a little wobbly as he seemed a bit shaken by the speed. So how was it? What? Your first Dragonite ride? Amazing. I mean, not as cool as finding a new Butterfree nest, but still great. He offered, and I couldn't help but burst into laughter at his words. You're definitely a bug nerd. I teased as I stifled my laughter, but he pouted at me in turn. Don't worry, nothing wrong with being a nerd. I'm a Pokemon nerd too, I said, poking my chest. He looked at me a little oddly for a minute before seemingly perking up that I wasn't making fun of him. So do you know where the gym is? Oh. It should be over there? He said, pointing outside of the town, and I nodded. Let's go find it then. I called out as I returned Dragonite and started running. I was looking forward to this. Ah. I groaned as the gym had a sign on it saying it was closed for the day. I didn't have this problem in Kanto. The gym leaders were just there. Well, it is near the end of the season? The only gym leaders that'll still be busy are Price and Claire. Maybe. Bugsy offered, although it took him a while as he was catching his breath. He had good stamina, but he still got a bit worn out after chasing after me. I hummed as I took in the closed doors and sign. I could probably pull an Ash and just make a nuisance of myself, but that was kinda rude. On the other hand, I really didn't want to be left waiting for a long time to finish the gyms. I was on a time limit. Do you think we could bring her back for the battle? No, that's dumb. I guess we'll just have to come back tomorrow. Want to go to Cyanwood or Krutik, do you think? I asked Bugsy, and he blinked in surprise at my question. Why don't we just wait? 'Cause it'll only take like an hour to get to another city. Dragonite ride, remember? I asked, laughing at the blank look on the purple-haired boy's face. Then he reached up and slapped each of his cheeks, and I couldn't help but laugh. That's right. I keep forgetting. I don't usually get to move that fast. He explained, and I giggled. Well, it's not fast movement, but can't Butterfree learn teleport? I asked, and Bugsy stilled for a moment as he considered it. I'm not sure. And I hummed. I vaguely remember using a Butterfree to rush back to Pokemon centers in one of the games. Wait, Arcanine can learn teleport. I wonder how useful it would be in real life instead of just a game. Could Arcanine instant transmission around a battlefield? Wahahaha. I laughed in delight at the idea and ignored Bugsy's uncomfortable stepping away as I considered it. I quickly grabbed a notepad out of my bag and wrote that down for later. Anyways, I said, returning back to what I was going to say. Teleport Butterfree. Something to think about, right? It'll let you move around a lot faster. Yeah. Bugsy said, puffing up. This is why I wanted to leave Azalea Town. I'd never have even considered that. You have to explore the world and meet new people and get new ideas from all over. That's what it means to be a Pokemon trainer. I said, and he looked surprised at my words before smiling. Yeah. Well, no point standing here. I think. Let's go fight Ghost Boy. I decided firmly. I needed more practice against ghost types for when I face Agatha anyways. So Morty would be a good challenge. Morty? Are you sure? He's really strong. So is Agatha, and I'm aiming to face her soon. It'll be good practice. I decided and instantly released Dragonite, who looked around in confusion at not being in battle. Sorry. Looks like the gym is closed today. So we are going to another city farther north. Feel like a flight? I asked, and she nodded, happily pumping her arms. Come on, Bugsy. I called out and laughed as he awkwardly approached Dragonite for another ride. Stop there. I called out, pointing, and Dragonite dipped a wing. Instead of landing in the city, she headed straight for the large tower. There wasn't really a good landing spot, and I didn't want to just enter without permission, but Dragonite hovered around the top of it, which was perfect. I couldn't help myself and looked around. Lugia? Hello? Were you around? Did you want to battle? To share a meal? I didn't have a silver or rainbow feather, so I doubt they would appear, but there was always a chance. Of course, they were both legendaries, so I probably shouldn't mess with them. Then again, Lugia had a baby, and that was the cutest thing ever. Vicky? Bugsy asked, and I shook my head clear. It's nothing, Bugsy. Come on, Dragonite. Let's land at the Pokemon Center. I called out, and we once more dipped with a single flap to start gently soaring down towards the ground below. The Pokemon Center's red roof was easily visible, and we soon landed just outside. Our appearance, of course, brought lots of attention. Kids and adults both gasping at the sight of a Dragonite and pointing. I could practically hear them muttering Blackthorn as they talked, but I just grinned all the wider. Gonna have to teach them that Johto aren't the only Dragonite trainers around. They're all watching us. Bugsy whispered, and I looked at him. Yeah? What's wrong? I asked because the boy was sounding almost nervous. I'm just not used to people looking at me. He revealed after a moment. The poor boy was shifting nervously in place. Even as the gym leader? Azalea is pretty small, and it's different with all the uncles and aunties. He revealed, and I really had to hold myself back from snorting. Bugsy was like the favorite child in a village of older men and women. I wondered if Ash had something similar with Pallet Town and all the older people there. Wait. Azalea Town was the palette of Johto, wasn't it? Bugsy was young and the gym leader, but almost everyone that lived there was older. I shook it off. Hopefully everything would calm down and any worries over war between Kanto and Johto would fade away, and instead all these old trainers could just have a wonderful retirement with their friends. I smiled at the thought and then refocused. They aren't really looking at you, Bugsy. They are looking at the Pokemon. So if you are nervous, why don't you release a cool Pokemon and distract everyone? But most people aren't interested in bugs. He whispered, and I had to wonder, did Bugsy live in the one place in Johto where everyone hated bug types or something? Bug types were awesome. I looked over the crowd that had been staring at Dragonite, who I haven't returned yet, and smiled. Almost all of them were younger boys. You have your Scyther with you, right? Yeah? Release him and see for yourself. I told the boy with a roll of my eyes, and then after a moment Bugsy did so, and the dull sound of a crowd across the street talking about Dragonite surged as all the young boys started shouting and cheering at the sight of the very popular bug type. It's a Scyther. So cool. Use Swords Dance. The younger boys all cheered out, and to my utter amusement Dragonite, who had been enjoying the attention of the crowd, slumped a little as she realized that more than half the crowd was now much more interested in the Scyther. I get it. Scyther was cool. Do you know where the gym is? I asked Bugsy, but he didn't hear me. Instead his ears were red and he was ducking his head at all the attention his Scyther got. Heh. Maybe telling him how to become the center of attention was the exact opposite of what he wanted. Hee. I considered saving him. Arcanine would probably drag the attention back, but Bugsy was the gym leader, and so he should learn to deal with this. Probably. Okay, forcing him into it was mean. Come on, let's grab some food. I called out, grabbing Bugsy and dragging him inside. Dragonite and Scyther both followed us. Inside the Pokemon Center it was cool and surprisingly empty. I guess most of the trainers would be closer to Mount Silver by this point. Nurse Joy behind the desk blinked in surprise at the sight of our Pokemon. Johto was like Kanto in that walking around with Pokemon out wasn't considered the thing to do. But she only gave us a smile as we approached. Welcome to the Akrutik Pokemon Center. Thank you, Nurse Joy. We are just here for a light lunch before trying to hunt down Morty. I told her, and she blinked before looking over to the side. I followed her gaze, where a familiar enough looking man was sitting in the Pokemon Center lounge. He was looking over at me. Morty. I challenge you. I cried out happily, swiftly pointing a finger at the man that was relaxing on the couch. Sorry, I'm on my break. He said after a moment and then turned back to the TV that was displaying some Pokemon battle. I deflated and looked at Bugsy with a pout. What is it with all you gym leaders not taking battles right now? It is just before the end of the circuit. The only gyms that would still be super busy is Mahogany and Dash. Blackthorn. Which you should already know. Morty called out from the couch, interrupting Bugsy. It took me a minute to realize that Morty saw Dragonite and came to conclusions. Smirking, I stalked over and pulled out my wallet. Then with a flourish I pulled out my trainer ID card. My Kanto trainer ID card. I've never been to Blackthorn. But beating Claire is part of the training to beat Lance. I explained to the older man, who took my card with a surprised look on his face. Wait. You're from Kanto? He asked in surprise, and I grinned. That's right. I'm Kanto's first Dragon Master. Victoria Ferris. I called out with a smile. Once more proclaiming my masterhood as the one trainer with the most number of dragon types in Kanto and Johto, I took the title by default, at least in my mind. Kanto trainer with a Dragonite? Morty whispered, and his eyes met mine. Ah. I recognized that look. I felt my smile go sharp as I knew what was coming. Well, I guess I'm accepting a challenger today after all. He rose up and looked down on me. Annoying. But then he spoke. I'm Morty of the Akrutique Gym. Accept your challenge, Victoria Ferris. I smiled like Jibble and nodded. Time to battle. As we were walking out, Morty paused and seemed to realize something. Turning around to Nurse Joy, he smiled bashfully. Rain check on our date? Nurse Joy just smiled, and I felt a cold shiver go down my spine. Morty was dating Nurse Joy? Well, he might not be anymore. Before he could say anything, there was the noise of a rumbling vibration. It took me a moment before I actually recognized it. Oh, it's a Jengar. I called out, looking around. The noise wasn't coming from Morty's shadow, which told me he was weak. Agatha kept like a dozen Jengar in hers. If Morty didn't even have one? Lame. Super lame. But I finally spotted the red eyes coming out of the leafy potted plant by the door. It gave off enough shadows to hide in. Ah, Jengar is safe, he isn't a Dan dash. Morty started saying something, but I had already approached Jengar and offered a sherry berry slice. I had to be careful holding the sliced bit of spicy berry. Because they were basically peppers, and rubbing my eyes or something would really suck. But I was dealing with a Jengar, and if there was one thing I knew about Jengar, they were all naughty in one way or another. A moment later, a dark form popped out of the shadows and a big tooth-filled maw opened up larger enough to devour my upper body, and then it chomped down on my hand. Pfft. That's not enough to scare me, I told him with a laugh. Jengar can't learn bite. I teased him and poked his forehead as Jengar had started licking my hand to take every drop of the sherry berry. Jengar, you shouldn't be trying to scare people, Morty said with a long-suffering sigh. Was it good? I asked, and Jengar pulled away with a pop, leaving my hand utterly soaked in spit. Gross, I decided, and Jengar started howling with giggles at my deadpan statement. You aren't scared? Bugsy asked, and I looked over to see the boy had taken more than a couple steps back from Jengar. Scyther was even standing protectively in front of Bugsy. Dragonite was just looking bored, scratching at her tummy as she waited patiently. Nope. Jengar likes to scare people, but especially a trainer Jengar isn't going to be dangerous. Then, because I noticed Jengar puffing up, I winked at him. Not that he couldn't be super dangerous and scary if he wanted. My addition had Jengar's smile stretch across his body as he cheered, looking up to Morty. Okay. You win, pal. You win, he said, surrendering to the Jengar who cheered. I wasn't sure exactly what was going on, but that was okay. Jengar seemed happy enough. Casually, I walked over to Nurse Joy, who thankfully handed me a towel, and I started wiping down my hand. Jengar drool was kinda smelly. Milotic crashed backwards at Jengar's surprise sucker punch as Jengar had appeared out of the floor to disrupt Milotic's next attempt at attacking. Come on, Milotic, don't give up. Recovery, I called out. That was now the second time Morty had turned my plan around. Milotic's Hydro Dig hadn't worked when Jengar had just jumped into the earth and got into a battle with Milotic underground before they had both surged back to the surface. Then when I tried to attack again, a nasty sucker punch. Considering he had been hitting me with status effect after status effect, the entire match was really starting to wear on me. Stupid, confuse Ray. Okay, fine. Milotic. Ice shield, I called, and in return Milotic nodded. Jengar hopped away in turn. Morty was staring intently, trying to understand what I was up to. And then Milotic started blasting ice beam everywhere. The bottom of the gym floor was already well saturated with water, so very quickly spires of ice shot up, giving Milotic some cover and making Jengar dance around them, hesitating. Jengar, Keep up the pressure, Morty called out, and I nodded. Shadow Ball appeared between Jengar's hands, and he threw it forward. Milotic shot up a spire of ice, and while it didn't stop the attack entirely, the Shadow Ball still had to chew through the defense first. Milotic grunted as he took the hit and focused up on his goal. We were synced, I could feel it, he knew what I wanted, and he did it. Jengar, knock it down, Morty called, and Jengar cackled as he disappeared into the floor. Milotic, get ready, I called out in turn, and Morty frowned. Jengar was moving and probably couldn't hear, so it was already too late. As the ghost popped up behind Milotic, despite my Noodle Boy's attempts to keep an eye out around him, I saw a powerful shadow ball begin growing, but then Milotic reacted, his tail flared with power. Water flowed over it, turning it from something already beautiful into something that glittered in the cool air, practically crystallizing with a bit of ice at the cold temperature. It shimmered for half a moment before coming down so catastrophically on Jengar's head that the poor ghost disappeared. The ground cracked, and I was forced to balance myself as the entire arena shook. Then everything went silent for a while before Milotic lifted his tail, revealing the hole Jengar was now embedded into. Gym leader Morty's Jengar can no longer battle, Bugsy called out from where he had been roped into working as the referee. I looked up before blinking and taking a moment to rattle off numbers on my fingers. Morty had used how many Pokemon again? Well, this match was my loss, he called out, looking shocked, and I blinked. I guess that was 6, wasn't it? I had gotten so into the battling I hadn't been keeping track. I smiled happily as I threw out Chansey, who went to help Jengar as Morty was hurrying over to his Pokemon, and I rushed up. Time to get another star badge. A note from Sarah's. Thank you all for reading and supporting. Chapter 70. I wasn't sure how this happened, but I was currently sitting in a nice living room with the curtains open and warm sunlight filtering in, as ghost Pokemon danced all around us through the air. Some tried to scare me and Bugsy, and my giggles kept escaping me as Bugsy yelped when Jengar kept jumping out of his teacup. Seriously, it was hilarious. I wish I had Mimikyu with me. I bet he would love this. You're an odd one, especially for a Cantonian, Morty finally said, and I blinked, looking away from where one of his haunters was blowing cold air across Bugsy's neck, making him constantly flinch and look around. That's kinda rude. No, it's not. He finally decided, taking a sip. You really don't mind them at all? Who? And then I realized what he meant and laughed. Why would I? They're Pokemon. I love Pokemon. Ghost types have a reputation. It's rare that kids can stand to be around them without a lot of time or effort. I host classes bi-weekly that lets the trainers and kids in town get used to ghost types. Heh. Well, Agatha is friends with my grandmother, and even if she wasn't walking around with Jengar in her shadow, well, her main partner likes Chesto berries the most. I added, because this was important information. Pretty sure he was modest-natured, which meant his special attacks would be crazy, but his physical ones would be weaker. Morty blinked at this, before leaning in a bit. You are talking about Agatha, the ghost tamer, of the Elite Four? Yep. Morty shakes his head for a moment. That explains a lot. I feel like you have the wrong impression, but that's fine. I shrugged, it really didn't matter. Besides, I have a ghost-type Pokemon too. Really? Morty asked, sitting up, and I nodded. My Mimikyu. He's a ghost and fairy type. He's the cutest. I again offered this very important information, and then looked to the side at the Ghastly that had been constantly staring at me over the side of the couch. Sorry. I whispered an apology. Ghastly is cute, but Mimikyu is the cuterest. Mimikyu? That was you. I got the updated report that a new ghost type was found. Morty went from being calm and laid back to suddenly sitting up. Can I see him? He's back in Kanto right now, I explained, and Morty continued to look, hoping I would offer to grab him, but I didn't. It would be a bit inconvenient for everyone back home to trade out my Pokemon twice, just because Morty wanted to see Mimikyu. I'll be at the conference, if you want to meet him then? Morty nodded then. I'll take you up on that. I study ghost types, and I'd love to learn everything I can. You're a researcher? Eh. I'm not a professor or anything, but I work with Professor Elm on his research when ghost types come up. I nod at that. Makes sense. Do you help when bug types come up? I asked Bugsy, and he flinched a bit, having been focusing on the haunter that was messing with him that he wasn't listening. Ah. Not really? I'm pretty new to being a gym leader, and bug types are pretty well understood. I nodded at that as I took a sip of the tea, and grimaced. That's mean. I told the room, and heard plenty of giggles. Did they mess with your drink? Morty asked, and I nodded. Salt. I explained, and he sighed at that. Sorry about them. Do you dash? Don't worry about it. I want to continue on anyway. Head to Goldenrod and wait for Whitney. I see. Morty said, with a nod. Well, I won't hold you. Congratulations again on winning your fog badge. You earned it. Thanks. It was a fun battle. You coming, Bugsy? Why, yes. The purple-haired boy called as he jumped to his feet and raced out of the room, actually zooming past me as he did. I took a moment to turn and see Morty give his haunter a look as the Pokemon laughed itself silly. Ah, he likes you. I informed the boy, who shuddered at my words rather than respond favorably. But then again, haunters show their affection by messing with you, and Bugsy was a bug man at heart. We left the little home attached to Morty's gym and wandered back onto the streets of Akrutik. Let's fly back and rest at the Pokemon Center. I'd rather not force Dragonite to fly right before a battle if I can help it. Oh sure. Bugsy responded, still looking behind him towards the house. I looked back and smirked. The home's formerly warm entrance was dark and sinister, as ghosts laughed from the shadows, darkening the corners. How cute they were saying goodbye. Bye. I love you. I called out with a big wave towards the shadows, and I noticed the shadows ripple and sway back. Come on. I cheered and hopped onto Dragonite's back, Bugsy scrambling to jump on. And that's dinner. I said with a sigh, wiping my head. Pokemon Centers did have a kitchen area, and I had just finished cleaning up the last of my pots. I walked back out into the lobby room and smiled. We had been the only real trainers staying here tonight, so Nurse Joy hadn't minded Bugsy and I releasing all of our friends. Well, except for Gyarados. My blue boy was just too big for inside stuff, but he was most comfortable without so many people anyway. I walked over, stepping over Milotic's tail. He didn't take up as much room as he and Dragonite cuddled, thankfully. Arcanine was already snoring, laying on her side plate clean, and Lucario was sitting in Siza, having finished her own meal. I turned to Bugsy's half of the room and grinned as Butterfree fluttered around happily. Those berries you brought were really good. Thanks. My mama went all over on her journey and picked up berry seeds, and opened a berry farm in Viridian. I explained as I settled in to finish off my meal as well, that Chansey had been guarding for me. Huh, really? I looked up and Bugsy flushed red a little as he looked away. I just thought. You know, since you're so strong, that your parents would be like gym leaders or something. He explained and I nodded. Nope. Papa never finished his journey at all, he only got a few badges before stopping. He works with the police as a Growlife trainer though. He's the one that brought me Growlife. I said, pointing at Arcanine. She was too headstrong for police work. But she's perfect as a battle Pokemon. He smiled at my affection, and despite sleeping, Arcanine's tail started wagging, which knocked Lucario a bunch until she decided to simply move. My parents aren't trainers at all. I mean, Dad has Shuckle, but he isn't really. Bugsy trailed off and I nodded. Shuckle juice? Yeah. That's fun. I've never had fresh juice before, only the bottled stuff at the stores. Oh, it's great. Shuckle loves storing a spear. So his juice is sorta sour, but it's great. I nodded at that and looked over his team. So if your parents aren't trainers, why gym leader? Oh. Well, it was sort of an accident. I've always ran off into the woods to play with the bug Pokemon, and one day a little girl, Kana, got lost in the forest. She's the grandchild of Hikorio Basama, and she's her only parent, her. They died in the war. He added quickly, brushing it over. Ouch. I sent my friends into the forest and ended up finding her, and Butterfree led her to us while communicating with Beedrill, and so we found her quickly. Big dang hero. I said simply, and he flushed at that, his ears going red. It was nothing. But everyone at the village thought I was impressive, and so they asked me to take over the gym. The license was old, and the reason there was no gym leader was just because no one wanted to do it. So I did. You're a good gym leader. I decided right then and there, and he shook his slightly shaggy purple hair back and forth, hiding his eyes. I'm weak. So? I asked back as I took a bit of my food. Strength isn't everything. Heart is. You proved you were the gym leader when you rescued Kana. That's what people will remember about you. Not how many young trainers you defeat. I just want to be strong too. He explained, and I nodded. We were both young. Kids basically. Even if Bugsy was fully into teenager stage. Then grow strong. Learn new things, train Pokemon. It doesn't have to be tomorrow. Bug types grow fast. He looked like he wanted to say something, but didn't, and I frowned, guessing what he was going to reply with. They grow fast, but don't end up strong. Sure, stat-wise, that was sorta true. You know, I have a friend who has a Butterfree on her team. I commented, and he looked up towards me confused. That's nice? Uh-huh. She's going to absolutely destroy most of the competition at this year's conference. I added, and he blinked. You should go to the conference. See what I mean? Ah. Well, it's kind of far. He replied. Good thing you know someone that is going that has a Dragonite. I mentioned hiking a thumb back at Dragonite, who looked up and waved. You don't have to. There is more to Pokemon than just strength. And that's coming from me who trains for that. Skill, combinations, or just experience are all major factors. He nodded slowly, and I nodded back at his acceptance. Cool. What? Again? I squawked in outrage as I noticed the sign on Whitney's gym again. Maybe she forgot to take it off? Bugsy offered, but I shook my head. As I walked up to the door and peeked in. Yep, empty. I slumped and then felt my spine stiffen. That's it. I'm pulling an anime protagonist. She can't have gone far. What? Bugsy questioned behind me as I rushed around the back of the gym. The gym was connected to fields. She was definitely back there, and I was going to get my battle. Come on. I called out as I ran, and I heard Bugsy start chasing not long after. Thankfully, it didn't take long to find who I was looking for. Whitney was out in the field surrounded by Miltank, and while I approached the fence and climbed up, I didn't leap off into the area. There was being brash anime protagonist, and there was being rude. This was a farm, and there was no telling how her Pokemon would react. So I made sure she could see me, and sat on her fence and waited. Bugsy asked as I settled in. She saw me, so I'm going to stay here until she comes over to talk to me. Then I challenge her. I explained, and Bugsy nodded slowly. Then we settled in to wait. To no surprise at all, Bugsy grew bored and ended up poking around the grass looking at bugs. Animal bugs, and not Pokemon, although if he had found a Spinarak or something, he'd be in love. It took a while, but eventually our continued presence meant the farm girl walked over. Wiping at her forehead with a towel she had over her shoulders, she looked me and Bugsy over before stopping. Bugsy had completely lost track of his surroundings and had been whispering to himself about the bugs he found for a while now. Whitney instantly crinkled her nose and shivered at Bugsy obviously playing with bugs. Hi. I greeted, distracting her as I rose up. I'm Victoria Ferris. I came by yesterday, but you were closed, but I'm looking for a gym battle. I explained loudly, and she tilted her head but shrugged. Sorry, I'm closed down now, and won't open again until the start of the conference. What? But it's still within the time frame. Yeah, but I run a farm, and do some work on the side for modeling work. I don't have time to be here constantly. So I closed the gym for the last month to get things taken care of. She explained calmly. But I need your badge. Come on. Don't you want a fun battle? Not really. I'm from Kanto. Gore. Evil Kanto trainer. Oh, how nice. Traveling to a different region for your journey must be hard. She offered, but her tone wasn't entirely honest. She was just fucking with me. Dang it. I needed all of the star badges to fuck with Lance. How dare she fuck with me? Miss Whitney? Isn't it against the gym rules to shut down the gym for any length of time without a clear and direct reason? Bugsy called out, interrupting as he tilted his head. What do you know? She asked back grumpily, and Bugsy just looked confused. I'm Bugsy? Yees? I run the Azalea Town gym? We met at the gym leader meetings? The girl blinked, looking at Bugsy for a moment, before a light redness came across her nose. Of course. I just didn't recognize you. Nice to see you again. She offered, and I just looked at her blankly. She totally didn't remember him. Like at all. Well, I'm on leave right now too. Bugsy offered, but my leave is only scheduled for a short time, and I'll be back before the conference in case of any last-minute challengers. Also, I'm out of the city, but you're right here? I was going to head to Goldenrod later today. I'm just taking care of the farm. Both of us looked at the girl judgingly, me mostly just copying Bugsy, and eventually she broke. Fine. I'll give you a gym battle. She mumbled, and I smiled happily. When I had asked for her strongest team, Whitney had looked at me weirdly, but then smiled and agreed. Her mistake. Toros. Out. Bugsy called out as Ref and Whitney looked on in shock. Arc. My girl barked happily after basically counter-charging Toros and winning. That's. Yeah, Arcanine is like that. I called out, and she growled before returning and throwing out another Pokemon. Wigglytuff. It called out and danced a bit before focusing up and looking serious. Let them hear. Whitney called out. Go. I called, and Arcanine blasted through Wigglytuff, sending the Pokemon rolling in the grasslands of Whitney's gym arena. I smiled and then focused as Wigglytuff rose up and sang. It hadn't been a knockout? Heh. You think she's just a cute face? She's tough. Whitney called out, and I focused as Arcanine turned to strike again, but instead slumped into the grass, a snot bubble already flowing out of her nose as she fell asleep. All right. Wiggly. Pain split. I winced as Wigglytuff weakly nodded and then used its move. Energy flowed between Arcanine and Wigglytuff. But Wigglytuff definitely got the better of the deal. Pain split added up the HP of both Pokemon and then split it equally. Arcanine was going to be beat up now. Return. I called out before anything else could be done. Oh? Dragonite. Punch. I called, and before Whitney could react, my girl blurred across the field with extreme speed and rammed into Wigglytuff at crazy speeds. Lightning striking at the hit. A Dragonite. And another speedster. Are you cheating? She shouted, outraged, and I just laughed, because all my Pokemon were fast. Wigglytuff can no longer battle. Whitney nodded. It was time. Go. Miltank. Dragonite return. Sorry, girl. I whispered to her ball. She had sent me a look for pulling her. Then I swapped to a new Pokeball. This one is going to be tough. This is her ace partner, but I think you can handle it though. Go Lucario. Lou. Lucario cried out, pumping herself up. So far she had struggled in these battles, but this was her perfect match. Miltank roared without Whitney needing to say a thing as she tucked into a ball and started rolling. While I was surprised she used this move right away, I wasn't surprised at seeing it. In the games, Whitney was famous for rollout. Lucario. Slam into Miltank. Use Aura Sphere. I called out, and she nodded and rushed forward. Lucario reached out both paws and slammed them into Miltank, pushing back against the surging Miltank. For a moment there was a grinding noise, before Lucario managed to push, sending Miltank ramping up over the Aura Sphere. Lucario blinked in surprise for a moment at how little the attack affected her before, shifting and gathering up energy for another aura sphere. Whitney frowned as she watched her Miltank land, and she just kept spinning back around for another attack. Huh. That rollout had done more than it should. Rollout took a few turns to really get hitting that hard. I had just a moment and I brought up everything I remember about rollout. Defense curl? Had Whitney combined rollout and defense curl? That would boost rollout's initial damage and make it even more powerful. What is that Pokemon? She demanded, and I called back just as Lucario's aura sphere finished charging. Lucario. A steel and fighting type. I called out and Whitney flinched just as aura sphere was launched. Miltank was amazing though. I could see it shift and dodge quickly in another direction, using the speed of rollout to just keep going. But despite her skill with the move, I had called out for aura sphere for a reason. The sphere simply shot after Miltank, following every rapid-fire dodge as Lucario controlled it until it struck. Lucario didn't need to dodge against Miltank as she worked, because Miltank was so busy trying to dodge the sphere. Miltank mooed as she was blown out of her rollout and sent tumbling across the grass. I expected her to continue to roll out, but instead to my shock Whitney spoke. Miltank. Strength. Whitney called out, and Miltank actually listened. A moment later, the ground around the Pokemon erupted as if a boulder smashed into the ground, obscuring Miltank. It was impressive. Not quite as impressive as the Nidoking from Pallet, but it broke up the terrain around her, and Miltank disappeared into the earth in a pseudo-dig. Heh. Not bad. Especially since rollout wasn't supposed to be a move you could just stop. I guess Whitney had trained Miltank in how to interrupt the move. Lucario. Use detect. Don't let her sneak up on you. I called and Whitney didn't like that, but in the end, shrugged. It's too late now. Get ready. She called taunting and I frowned. A moment later I heard it. A moo, and then, as the dust cleared, Miltank was sleeping? Sorry. But this is going to be my win, Kanto girl. Whitney called out, which was a bit much, because she was down to one Pokemon, but then I saw what came next. Miltank, despite being asleep, curled up and started a rollout. Rest and sleep talk. I called out instantly pointing at her and her grin flinched shifted into a glare and then a nod. That's right. And if you know that, then you should know Miltank is fully healed and ready for battle. Lucario shifted without a word and dodged the first assault of rollout. Detect was useful in dodging a move you can't see after all. But Lucario. Aura sphere. She nodded and gathered energy even as Miltank spun around, and as Miltank was about to strike, Lucario pushed forward. Aura sphere, slamming into the rolling Pokemon, and both attacks sparked off each other. It only took a moment, but the type advantage showed through. Miltank ended up once again ramping up and over Lucario, who wasn't injured. Already, she was turning ready for another aura sphere, but I frowned when Miltank rolled straight into the area she had used her strength on. No way. Using rollout in between other moves, and keeping the benefit. You want to talk about cheating? I called out in outrage and Whitney laughed. Somehow while asleep, and sleep-talking Miltank was still getting the power boost of rollout, while also seemingly healing since 2 aura spheres should have knocked her out. Damn, that was a crazy combo. I felt my face splitting into a grin. This was fun. It was so cool to see new moves and combos that you couldn't do in the games. This was fun. Really, really fun. Lucario. Work up. We'll have to win in one hit. Huh. You think you can do that? Miltank won't let you. I saw it then. There was too much dust from rollout keeping Miltank hidden, but at Whitney's words, the dust shifted enough. Miltank's strength had created a bowl in the earth, and she had been racing around it in circles. While asleep. And keeping rollout going. Whitney might be annoying, but she was an expert trainer. This was something that couldn't be done without lots of effort. Tank it. Keep the workup going. I called and Lucario nodded. She didn't look happy, but she did it. Gathering energy flowed over her, and her mouth split in a growl. And then rollout slammed into her, the blow so powerful it launched her upwards, sending her pinwheeling into the sky. Bugsy let out loud enough I heard, and I had to stop myself from laughing as well, because it was kind of funny. But more importantly, I didn't like it when people hurt my friends. Lucario landed without too much trouble, and the energy of work up was still flowing over her. Can you take it again? I called, and Lucario nodded and instantly refocused, and the energy grew even larger, and Lucario looked angrier. Her eyes glowing red. Then she turned and was slammed into by Rollout. The hit was so loud it actually caused wind to kick up. Rollout was getting too strong. It was only because Lucario had a double type advantage that she wasn't put into the ground. Now, I called, and Lucario turned. Aura Sphere, glowing much brighter than before as out of the dust Miltank came through like a wrecking ball. The clash was explosive and Aura Sphere was bigger, Rollout was hitting harder. It didn't just scrape off and send Miltank flying off. The energy exploded and I pulled my goggles down just to keep my eyes on the battle. Miltank! Whitney called out in shock first, and then as the dust cleared enough for me to see. Miltank was on her back, eyes dizzy, and Lucario was sitting beside her, gasping for breath. Miltank can no longer battle. The winner is challenger Victoria Ferris. Yes. I cheered and rushed in, and to Lucario's surprise jumped into her laughing all the while as I hugged her tightly. You did it. I cheered, and Lucario huffed a little pleased noise.